나오게 멘토시 되는 요 마인스 대양 군도 매바당 라시진이 예배민스 다가 이제 대양 이 가자도 싫어 대양 군도 매봐야 말레스 라시기 여봐야 말레스 뒤인데 다 당신이 여봐 마인스 이런데 다 간제 또면 나오게 멘토시 되는 말이야 요 마인스 당연 단다 되지 장신지니 예배민스도 장신기니 예배민스도 다 장신기 요 말레스 라용을 답변나 실한 연구나 가르쳐 거래 수동방어가 동반이 수소 수레장 동반이래자 수세 많이 놓스 아 어디 이제 수동방어스라도 수코나 동반이 그게 시고 말아 수랑신지 동바레스 거라 수동방어스 이제 다들 된다 레고 다 같이 수랑신기 동바레스 봐 수동방어 동반이 수소스데 수랑신지 주베 동바디 아니 소금모레스 소금모스 동바 니레자 소셰 마이노스도 소랑시 저 동바 텔레 소금모셰 마레스 로도 동바 니레자 소셰 가서 그래 수 동바 동바 니소 소레자 동바 니레장 동바 니레자 소셰 동바 니레장 소셰 마이노스다 니레장 다지 속대 아니 아 랑시 동바 모치 임바 낭신 동바 니대 수그당 모치 다디 간제 양디 때나 갈시버스나 아, 속당 속이 되게 동년이 보대 뭐지로 도바타 되시고 다디 간지 다디 nen가지 뭐지로 도바타 되시고 도바타 되면부터 하고 그러 도바타 되 찍을 수 없고 그래 찍을 안에 속이 되게 동년이 거와 그러면 다이나 가만 봐 도바타 되다 뭐지 뭐들라 들어 속다 속을 하시면 뭐지 인다데 가르서는 속으로 가도 두바이네 두점이네 아니 랑신 그 동병 못 되어르모도 코로나 가서 그래 수질을 또 먹고 왔어 아니 지금 근데 산재 전에 맞아요 수질 규제 수 갈래 또 먹고 봐 수코라 랑신이 좀 동병 못 두바 인자 랑신 좀 동병 못 두바 레스 딱 아니 아 수들 랑신 남다 소지든 가자 수들 랑신 남다 소지 가자 랑 가자 되니 그 가서 그 랑신 주 두바 당 매번 예고 타고 당자 당자 소리 찾는 거 됐다 간제 또 뒤에 속랑 신지 매번 됐다 간제 속에 또 돈이로 와 러시 남다 찾는 거딱 간제
뒤는 누구야? 뒤는 등탕에 카푸치노. 맞어.
아
뒤는 내가 얼마 더 받으러 등탕에 카푸치노. 온다.
좋아 어디 이제 딱 간제 양연등에 가려고 해서는 속당과 속당 속을 랑신 매번 속을 돈이니 뭐치 버레스 이는 군인이 보디 도바타데 직 속을 돈이 다직 아니 아 속sla고 레스 로 땅 뭐치 버레 속 동반이래 로수 수요 머리 속래 로수 동반이 샹코는 뭐치 버치자 레스 로 아니다 속고난 당 너만에 란시 답답을 했어. 가도에는 수주전 때 먹고 그런 답답을 했어. 됐어.
So this is a very profound subject, and not always easy to clearly put into words what Rinpoche is saying. So I'm asking him to. I'm sorry, it's difficult for me to get every point he's making. So there's one explanation. So what is the relationship between relative truth objects and their ultimate nature? So he quotes the Heart Sutra, which has lines which say, for 12, 18 dhatus, that it says 4 ways. So one, it says form is emptiness is form. Said then form is not different from emptiness is not different from form. So each one of these phrases, each one of these statements can be interpreted slightly differently to clarify the relationship. So when you say form, you think of, something that you perceive, physical object, for example. And then when you think of emptiness, you think of them as separate or distinct, but they are not. So the philosophical, description of the relationship is they have the same nature. Ngojik means their essence is inseparable. So when form, relative truth objects such as form, is manifests, it doesn't manifest in a way that is without emptiness. Emptiness is since the beginning of time, every relative truth object has never come into existence with a essence. Their very nature is to be void of any essence. So they seem to be distinct. And then, so in addition to being ngojik, then it says they are dokpa. Dokpa tade means, I don't know, it's hard. The word has something to do with when you use a word to describe something, or when you, the meaning of a word, for example, takes on a certain quality. And for example, if you talk about an apple, for example, an apple has a color and it has a taste, and the color and the taste, they seem to be like separate things, but they are part of the same object, the same one and the same entity. So you can't separate them from the apple itself, just like you can't separate emptiness from form or any other relative truth object. Yet, when we think of them, when we use words to describe those aspects, they take on qualities as if they were distinct. So conceptually, they seem distinct, but in fact, they are part of one and the same nature. For now, I think maybe that's the best I can do.
Tiro di indu da kaso gore su rangxin ji mojuwa yin za su ko rangxin ki namba tabo so cha de gore.
Oh yeah. So another phrase is saying that use a word that it form, for example, because it is empty, therefore, then uses a word that means something like pure. Nambar dakpa means to be pure. Ranshingi nambar dakpa means, really, it means to be devoid of an essence. So emptiness means to be, you can say pure if you like, but it really means to be devoid of an essence.
제상다 랑신 지 넘버 타고디 산제 살아야 랑신 남다게 원유고 찾고 랑신 넘버 타고 저러 랑신 넘버 타고 주야 산제 살래 용도 랑신 남다게 원유고 찾고 다른 랑신 주 줘봐 저러 랑신 줘봐다 랑신 뭐 줘봐녀러 랑신 뭐 줘봐디 다 랑신 남다수 찾고 랑신 뭐 줘봐 랑신 그 줘봐녀러 랑신 줘봐디 다 가서 정말로 Kopangpa pangpa tila ta ko tema yin to lubu wacha, kopangpa pangpa ti tautu tila lubu namda ki chadru ngonyo, ranshin namda chadru ngonyo ko se choro.
So one of the reasons to use this phrase to say that entities are pure of an essence means, if I understand correctly, saying that when we perceive dualistic objects, when we perceive objects with our mind, as if it's apart from our mind, then the object, for example, form, it appears as if it has some kind of essence, right? It looks like it exists on its own. So that quality of seeming to be self-existent is like its stain, its impurity. but its real nature, its true nature, is it lacks that. We can't see that in our unenlightened state, but that is its true nature. But one way to understand it that way. The other way, another way to think of it is that everything has always has always had the quality of lacking any self-existent nature. Even ourselves, our own minds, we do not recognize our own purity, our own lack of inherent existence, but that lack of inherent existence, as we develop and the continuity of our existence, each moment of it is accompanied by that same purity. And when we reach enlightenment, when we become Buddhas ourselves, that purity that we always had takes on the quality of Buddha's Swabhavakaya. So that's kind of what Rinpoche is alluding to when he says that all things are, and it's not him, it's the way the way the doctrine is expressed, but the meaning of the phrase Dranshingi Nambar Dakpa means it comes from the fact that we don't see the ultimate nature of things. We don't see their purity, but purity is there, nevertheless, always has been there, always will be there. That it's not something that when we perceive it, then now it came into existence. It's always been there.
근데 이제 다 최간다 가인을 다시 나빠 타고 레데 만족을 다 라문을 두 번째 난 거요. 그래서 돈이 무슨 마도 소소죠. 이제 될라다 각초 가르토네 라문을 두 번째 난 거. 그래서 어디인데 같이다 제가 디넬로도 하거나 로아다 동반이 무슨 또도 디넬로도 하고 그래서.
So another way to think of it is that all entities that ordinary beings, you say ordinary beings, those persons who are still subject to samsara, sosokyo means non-arya. All such persons, even aryas themselves, but let's stay with the non-arya for the moment, that all of their perceptions are such that no matter what object appears in their mind, always takes on the quality of appearing to be, having the appearance of being self-existent. There's no other way that an ordinary person can, can develop an awareness of an object. But that's fundamentally false. And only when we realize emptiness directly can we recognize that those things that seem to have self-existent nature don't, and that their true nature is some state in which they are empty of that false appearance. So this is, the meaning is a little bit difficult, and to kind of appreciate it in terms of your everyday experience is also difficult to make that connection. But that latter part, to understand from the point of view of your everyday experience, crucially important.
안 남게 매도 나시레스 남게 매도 신 남게 매도 디 수질 되고 남게 매도 요말 받아 지도 더 봐면 봐. 오 남게 매도 나시레 대나 마된 요마이스. 텐데 주제 텐데 있나 아니 주제 텐데 이제 쭉 간다 가이는 마대 뭐지 자원이네 요 말이스 대나 마도 요마이. 뭐 좀나 되도 조다 된다 뭐 좀나 되도 조다 된다 뭐 좀나 되도 조다 된다. 오케이. 세운데 다 단다 되고서 되시고 가서 뭐 좀나 되도 조다 된다 또 봐게서인데 도착 소주 두고 요사래. 도착 두고서 뭐 두바이나 뭐 좀나 되도 뭐 좀나 되도 봐 조다 된다 또 봐게서 답변아 단다 되러 가서 그래. 요거 저지 아니 안시 좀 매대 된데 배시 정신 좀 매대 도착 안시 두바이나 아니 조다 또 봐게 그래서 하고서
Yeah.
인베스터 pen 그래 다시 메타 제바 인베스 라고로 와 다시 좀 메타 제바 인베스 라고로 와
Choje.
메다디 제바
Oh,
임베
that's what.
로
Choje.
제베다시 다 메다고 두부 체도 도잡 두두 제 메다냐 다데 메다고 도고시 메다고 도고시 따바로 따발라 제바 메와스 어디 도잡 루틴은 시진 단다 되고서 아니 가서 그래 랑시 주베 도고시 랑시 주발라 아니 주다겐라 또 봐요 마리아스 도잡 두고 도잡 제잡도 또 수수요로 도잡 두고 있었대.
So we started with the second half of 13, and now moving on to 14, verse 14. So it says, Dome means to be, here it does, non-contingent. It means not to be dependent, not to be dependent on other things, to have some form of existence that is, independent. It says not to be dependent is a quality which is like that of a sky flower, right? Sky flower is a symbol or example of something that doesn't exist. So to be non-contingent or to lack dependence, which is like being non-existent, is like being non-existent. Therefore, there's nothing which is not dependent. So this is nothing. Yeah, and talking now. It's kind of, what should I say? Addressing the idea of how being dependent, the meaning of being dependent, also represents is the means of understanding that it's not self-existent. So it says in the second half of the verse, Ngoa Drupna means if it did exist by way of it, then it would be, it's that existence, right? If it did exist with an essence, sorry. If it did exist with an essence, that existence would be contradictory to the idea of being dependent, to be dependent on causes and conditions. So it's saying that anything which has its own mode of being, it's by the very meaning of that word, if properly understood, is that it doesn't depend on anything else. That's what it's saying. So if it did exist by way of its own nature, then that very meaning is the opposite of being dependent on causes and conditions. So that's saying in the reverse way, it's saying that, for example, the thing which is how is that? The sprout which is asserted to be non-existent is not self-existent, is not self-existent because it depends on causes and conditions. So then if you take the elements of that argument in Buddhist logic, so the reason is because it is dependently arisen, right? So being dependently arisen is meant to prove that it's not self-existent. So the reverse of that argument is if it not to be dependently existent would be for it to be self-existent. So the reverse of the argument would prove that the opposite of the thesis.
你这说，다 디지 때문에 좋아래 마도 초가 유명해 란시 기는 동발래 마도 초가 매버서 디지 때문에 좋아래 디지 때문에 좋아래 마도 초가 유명해스 아 디지 때문에 좋아 마도 초가 란시 기는 동발래 차 아마도 초가 매버서 소다 단데 때가서 차바도 두고 요사래 란시 기 가서 땡중 임베 균쟁이 아니 란시 동바도 두고도 와 땡중 임베 균쟁이 다지도 도잡 두고도 다지 다부르시래 다지도 도잡 두고 와 가서 그래 랑시 매버 도베시 랑시 주발라 아니 차제 밑에 봐대 두고로 다 단대 뒤가서 땡땡이베 준지 땡땡이베 준제지 랑심마 봐 땡중이베 준 랑심마 봐야 차버 두고도 와 그러와 차버 두고도 야 가서 그래 디지 때네 좋아 디지 때네 좋아래 마도 초가요 뭐 때네 좋아 마도 초가요 뭐 랑시치는 동바 레스도 와 진짜 때네 좋아 마도 요 말이 라워도 때네 좋아 인자다 랑시 동바 레스에서 랑시 동바래 마도 초가요 마 인스가 어디 다 가서 그래 때네 중앙 인자 란싱 동바 레스티 차바도 두고 딱 한지
So in verse 15, it's making a connection between the notion, again, making a connection between being dependently originated and being void of any real essence. So the verse, what to say, the assertion made in the verse as a whole is saying that you taught, right? You taught that, and then the first half of the verse is like a reason. It's saying because there's no entity whatsoever, right? No dharma, no permanent or impermanent entity whatsoever, except those that arise dependently, right? And therefore, that being the case, there's no entity whatsoever that also is not empty of any self-existent essence. So if everything must be dependently originated, then that means everything must be void of self-existence. You taught that.
다 랑신 도고 메베지 촌나 랑신 가야나 냥인 도와 메 두고 도와 메바죠 다 랑신 세디 가서 랑신 도야 주는 요 말이야 다 소조 자야 다 근데 내가 요 메바 근데 차 주는 요 말, 랑신 도고 메베치 아니 최 가시를 랑신 요나 촌놈 랑신 가요나 아니 냥엔 대바서도 냥엔 대바서도 다 냥엔 수도 뇨모 소거라 뇨모 될 대바 뇨모 메바서 메바 차도 그래 촌나 랑신 요나 촌나란시 가요나 냥에 대바 미롱시 다 냥에라 대수도 다 녀모 빵빵바 토비아도 녀모 메바 아니 조금도 와 메바서 조바 군수 다 간지 조바 망고 여러 다 간지 녀모라서 와테다 다는 군조고 조바라서 덴지 조바라서 와텐 탄텐도 조바 강가 메바서 주는 메고 랑실라티 가서 그래 랑실 레바슈사로 랑실 도고 메나 아니 냥에 대바요 말이 조금도 봐요 말이스 어디서 그랬어
So that teaching di karsa trashi teaching gi leu nishu tsashi warwa tembashi gi karsa ngobor ma wa tetso gi ani ranshin gi mena ani karsa tembashi di yo mares
네, 다 러시면 뭐고 뭐 말이 런주고 면직 런주고 면직 뭐고 뭐 쓰다 센상
아니 di karsa komulu juki di Tokyo sorsi Ranshingi yena and Tetoyama. Ranshingi meta and Ruma. So this verse is in fact I think the commentary makes reference to it. The chapter 24 of the Nagarjuna's root treatise on wisdom is called Analysis of the Truths. It's the four truths. It's a very important chapter. It starts out with the realists objecting to the view of emptiness and the middle way school by saying that if things didn't have any self-existent nature, then you wouldn't be able to explain the four truths. It would be, kind of ineffective. The process of purification, attaining nirvana, couldn't be properly explained. So Nagarjuna presents their position and then he reverses it. He says the opposite is true. If things were self-existent, then it would be impossible to establish the Four Noble Truths. So in the first half of the verse, it says, intrinsic nature cannot be negated. It really means something more like it cannot change. So if something possessed a self-existent nature, then that nature didn't depend upon anything else. it wouldn't change. Then that thing would be permanently whatever it happens to be. No possibility to reverse your samsara condition, for example. He says, because because a nature, an essence, could not be reversed, here it says negated, but could not change, it could not undergo modification, then it says, if there were a real essence, that if things possessed a real essence, and then the third line says, it wouldn't be possible to achieve nirvana. So that's the main topic in chapter 24. And then in addition to that, more profound consequence, if you like, is that elaborations also could not be reversed. Elaborations means then the appearance of self-existence and the belief in self-existence also could not be removed, meaning you could not, achieve realization. Elaborations could not be ceased. Using the word that Dokpa in the first line and in the fourth line means they could not be removed. One saying they couldn't change, and therefore the second one means then elaborations could not be removed. Because they actually, which it's valid. If they had a self-existent nature, then the perception of a self-existent nature wouldn't be wrong, wouldn't be false. So like that.
어다데 디제 랑신 남제 생게 자에 양도 케베 소소레소 델로 수요 공부 뉴스 어디 인도 다제 얘기들 지고야 버래 가시 간시 수jo 송에 친다 도발하는 자와데 시조 도바 텔라 뒤송을 내시다 교제 디치 랑신지 넘버 제시 아니 생게 자에 아 생게 자에 양양 송과 이 케베 소소 렉송바 생게 자에 아니 케베 소소 렉송바 델로 수요 공부 뉴스 다 델라 아니 수게 가서 그래
So now verse 17 is kind of conclusion or kind of reinforcing the points that Je Tsongkhapa made up to here. So again, the verse starts with therefore, right? For these reasons, when you assert that that things are free of any self-existent essence, right? Everything is utterly free of intrinsic nature. You have asserted that, right? It says, and how did you assert that? It says, describing Buddha as having asserted it in the midst of wise persons, right? In the gathering of the wise. So the Buddha asserted this with great authority, right? Like with the sound of a lion's roar, right? It says, you proclaim with the lion's roar, and then the verse saying that being such a powerful teaching, it was like, who would dare who would have the audacity? Yeah, who would have the audacity to challenge you?
랑신 가야 메바 다스타 랑신 가야 메바 델라디니 디중 남샤 탐제 타와 미카도 메주고 다 랑신 최담제 라시 가야 메바체 메바 데토라 최담제 데부 주델라디니 데부 디용고 데부 델라디 용고 남샤 탐제 타바니 아니 시지고도 메가와 메주고스 메고 문도스
So here we have in verse 18 these two equivalent notions. To the first one is Ranjin Gaya Meva. Ranjin Gaya Meva means no essence whatsoever, no self-existent nature of any kind whatsoever. That's asserting emptiness, right? Lacking any self-existent essence, where it says intrinsic existence. That's the one proposition. Then the equivalent proposition, the two which are, on equal footing, is the the validity, right? This is important to say the validity of all the formulations. Namshak means like explanation. The explanation of, for example, the truth of origination, karma, and mental afflictions is a cause of the samsaric condition of suffering. And likewise, the truth of cessation is the result of having generated the wisdom that perceives, in this case, emptiness, right? So those two formulations and every other formulation, all the subtleties, explanations about karma and the results of karma, all the cause and effect, right? So here it says, "Dila tene di jung." So the fact that this, meaning some cause, on the basis of this cause, this arises. On the basis of this condition, that the existence of this entity is established, right? All of those formulations, which are the Buddha has made and which the realists are aware of, but they take it to mean self-existent existence. Tsongkhapa is saying that what the Buddha really was saying was the opposite of that. That all of relative truth formulations that the Buddha gave, the validity of those formulations can only be established, can only be shown when you assert that nothing whatsoever has a self-existent nature. So it says those two propositions are in Miguelwa means they are not at all in opposition with one another. They're not at all contradictory. It's not contradictory to say something is lacks self-existent and yet can be causally efficient. And so it says, needless to say, that those two things not only are not contradictory, but they also are, can be shown to be in complete conformity. Dua means to literally come together. It means they fit together.
Tene juye junze tata wala meden she lesu tene bunje ma wala na mebe juice ta tene juye junze se tene jawa juye junze ta tende lewa siwe junze tene jawa junwa de lewa siwe junze ene tata wala meden she ta ga chebe tanzi tawe tanzi tashi o te de kala ne meden ba o te de tempo me wa duzo rangshi ge tse o meden she o meden me chap te leksun deni gonje se tende sung lego sung gombo choeje ani ma de an ma wala na me ba ta ga je tende tende do ju tende tende ta tong ba ni tong ya ma de ma ne na ma wala na me ba ta la na me junze res.
So verse 19 is an assertion which says, which is talking, it gives the subject matter as being the excellent teaching, right? The excellent teaching. Leksung means this excellent saying, this excellent teaching, this excellent doctrine. And then the assertion or the excellent declaration, even you could say, which is described in the first half of the verse in Tibetan, which is to say that by virtue of the fact that things arise dependently, means on the strength of understanding that things arise dependently, then it's saying you, the disciple, you, the practitioner, will not gravitate, you will not resort to. Here the translation says you will not lean, but it means you will not have the tendency to take hold of any of the extreme views. You will not fall into nihilism or eternalism. So it's saying that dependent origination is the most effective way to avoid falling into either of the two extremes. So it says, this saying, this teaching, this, like Kundini, he says, that's the reason why you the savior, right? Going Choje, right? Going Choje means oh savior, can be referred to as the unsurpassed teacher, unsurpassed speaker. Mawa means someone who speaks, but here it means speaker in the sense of a one who teaches and proclaims in this case, a spiritual doctrine.
다 대근 뭐 동바 다 델레 덴데 중앙이 네번 예고 편주도 대면 번을 조셔봐 델레 뭐저 줘봐다 델레 메도 중앙가 추디도는 추디 철라 되는 더바 주제 신도 means 다 대근 저 대근 뭐 동바다 다 공도 먹고 싶어서 뭐 상시 주도 동바당 뭐 상시 주도 동바 이게 최대의 대부대 용거 최대의 대대의 대스 간제 강간 남샤샤도 델레 대부 중앙이 어디 변조 네번이부터 동신도 다 대도도 자제 넘셔 봉토야 네번이부터 편준 계획 매버제 아니 직접 직체도가 됐다 간제 계획 반에 적재 봤다 계획 지금 내 맞아 직접 적재 동바 된주 동배 적재 봤대 딜레 뭐저 좋아요 말이스 딜레 매도 좀 다 딜레 하고지 간요 말이 수디 절로 떠는 다 수디 절로 떠와이나 다 떠와 주시는 다 딜레 하고 또 돌아다녀요 말이세요. 또봐 주시 신도 means.
So now verses 20 and 21 are describing two things. One is that the relationship between emptiness and dependent origination is that these ascertaining them, right here it says "neva nivo." Neva means gaining a sure and correct understanding of each proposition. So understanding that all of these things, all of this means everything that we perceive, ordinary objects, that they are void of any real essence. That's one proposition. And yet, the fact that they nevertheless are still subject to the doctrine of dependent origination. That's the second proposition. So understanding that despite being void of any self-existence, they still exhibit the properties of being causally dependent on one another. It says, these two propositions, to be able to, what should I say, to see that they are not contradictory, to see that they are not in opposition to one another, that's really the hardest thing to understand about this ultimate teaching. So it says here, these two certainties, to recognize that they are not pensun gegme, means they do not impede one another. One does not cancel the other one out.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go look. Something's burning.
맞아.
도와주면서
begin tomorrow. CD boom.
도와있는 시간이 있었다. So it said that emptiness in no way negates or diminishes dependent origination, and vice versa. Dependent origination, properly understands, means to be void of any self-existent essence. So when you analyze these two propositions correctly, not only do you see that they don't impede or obstruct one another, they in fact are supportive of one another. Emptiness is kind of like the possibility for change. And change is the proper way to understand what occurs because things are empty. So it's saying this is that what is more amazing, what is more extraordinary, what is more marvelous than this this seemingly contradictory things, but which are absolutely not contradictory. So when you taught emptiness and dependent origination in its deepest sense, then that showed how extraordinary you are. So if there were any way to praise you, it would be because of that. That would be the real reason and the best way. There's no other, right? Shendu means Trudi means by this, in this manner, due to this extraordinary, revelation which you have made. Then if someone were to praise you, this would be the way to praise you and not any other way.
Ta mungbe tendu song ayi, kangshi che da she che pa, ti rangshi mebe da, miso jo la chaji, che jo sungi jebe zu, tene jongwa kenla ne, tonye ngaru miso ba, de la ko ngo sa jus. Ta mungbe tendu song ayi, yi mishi ba, ane mung, yi juni mishi ba, ma shenge mung ba, ta mudu ba la so ba desi goro, mungbe tendu song sha jo tenzu, ane kangshi che da she che ba, ta kangshi che go song sha jo de, ta she che che ne. Rangshi mebe dadi ani meso ba de namju de ba de la halya yo mare sarchi yo de mosa che ka yo mare chuju sungi jebe zo dene jo kana churang tumle je rani ge sungdi ta jebe zo na ji chene da rangju ba menje de ge rangshi do ba kelen go wa oti yundu chuju sungi jebe zo na ji kelen ge no de zo ge dene jo kelang ne ani ta kelang ge langile ani 돈이 나로 랑시 주가 동아디 랑시 주가 동아디 메세네다 랑시 주가 장시 줍스 거라 랑시 주가 동아디 메소바 데라 코마자 다딜라 마사 제고 도스타 제르무지 테소임베.
So then verses 22 and 23 are related. So 22 is saying this is not surprising. But this is surprising, right? 23 is saying this is very surprising. So 22 is saying it's so for example, non-Buddhists, their overall doctrine is fundamentally at odds with Buddhism. Fundamentally, they don't accept the unique tenets of Buddhism, such as subtle impermanence, like that. So the fact that they would, oppose what you might say about a lack of self-existence. So that's not surprising, right? So it says, Mongbe Drendu. Mongba means they are subject to ignorance, meaning they don't have the good fortune to be favorably disposed to the Buddha's teaching. So they're like slaves to their ignorance. Then Choeje means they are those who are naturally in opposition to whatever you might teach. Whatever you might teach, they feel some kind of disaffection with it. But it says, so therefore, by them, dei means when you talk about means when you use words to describe lack of self-existence, then it's not surprising that miserva means that they wouldn't tolerate it, that they would not feel inclined to accept it, right? Tsajiya means what's surprising about that? That's not surprising at all. But what is surprising, he says, kirki sungi jebe zer means the most precious, and valuable teaching among your speech is dependent origination. Then Buddhists, for someone who considers themselves Buddhist and being someone who does accept your most precious teaching of dependent origination, when you proclaim, ngaro means like loud sound. When you proclaim, when you assert with great authority, right, the doctrine of emptiness, that the real meaning of dependent origination is emptiness. When you assert that for them, I mean Buddhists who accept dependent origination, for them not to miserva means not to tolerate it, not to be willing to accept it, not to be willing to believe it. Then for me, this is Tsongkhapa speaking, I find this, really amazing.
다 랑신 메라 찌베고 라멘 텐제 대중기 미니지네 랑신 두 지나 타부 교디 파저 남제 레저베 종어다다 대저베 최저저베 랑세디 타방 기니 찌와 차스 다 랑신 메라 찌베고 다 랑신 메바들라다니 가서야 체야 고연하면 라는 메모테 가려서 대저 도와주면 돼. 세상 텐제 도와주면 이게 다 민코라 로 민이 코라니 가서 그래 랑시 두버스 람나 애니 다 대도 교우데 다 간제 단다디 란주와 면제 교우 된조 아니 교우 된조는 팝조 남제 아니 랩버 트베서 달야 랑가 치야 랩버 트베 아니 주무 아다 람상고 어디 대다 다다 태워 주와 인자 아니 choje juwa lamsa dela tab khari chigore ta chorang ge tuk yeya ge juwa lamsa bo dela tab khari chigore sta tab sangsho dene kaso deje jowa juwe junzel dene rangshi meba dele chigore dinjene rangshi min khora rangshi duba jingu do ati yende ta chas.
So, in the next pair of verses, again related, but they're continuing on the idea that it's so unfortunate that your own followers cannot properly understand this most precious teaching of dependent origination as being the excellent way to gain an understanding of emptiness. So it says, "Ranshi mela tiwe go." Go means the door. In this case, means the means by which to lead disciples to an understanding of lack of self-existence. Lack of self-existence means emptiness. The unexcelled door means the unexcelled means for doing so is through the doctrine of dependent origination. The doctrine of dependent origination, then it's a verbal teaching. It's given in words, right? But if you take those words in the wrong way, if you take the words of the teaching of dependent origination to mean self-existence, that things have some real essences, then you are taking it in the opposite way that it should be taken. And so by taking it that way, zina means if you hold it that way, means if you take the meaning of dependent origination to be not that things lack self-existent natures, but that they possess self-existent natures, then you're it's how can you be taught? You're taking the most precious teaching in the opposite way that it's meant to be taken. So then it's saying, what is that like? It's saying the door, the entry point, right? Entrance, right? Entrance here. Jungmo means the means of entry by which to lead. So it says paktok. Pakpa means Arya. Arya means the person who achieved then direct realization of emptiness. Then those Aryas rely on the correct understanding of dependent origination to gain a realization of emptiness. Realization of emptiness is how they become Aryas. But if you're taking the doctrine of dependent origination to mean possessing real essences, that's the opposite of emptiness. So how can that teaching, which is the way by which the Buddha's disciples properly can become Aryas, supreme Aryas, then if you take it in the opposite way, then here's an excellent path. Lamsang means that excellent path, means that excellent teaching, that excellent understanding about dependent origination that leads to understanding emptiness, then you're misunderstanding that path. So how can you, who take it the wrong way, what other way is there to bring persons like you to a state of realization? Tabgangi means what other means is there by which to lead you than this supreme teaching?
你说，
No?
他让心居民对面堂，点点对的这么你，其他不能写下了，明个多玩意就就是，让心居民对面堂是，他让心写的，他就把就要嘛了，他看见没就，就是叫对面了的，我到让心居民对面说起了下，你点点对当时，点点写的他记了点的穷啊，给点点说，点点这话穷是个。对当，你这嘛这些就，我到第二步的，让些居民对面对当，点点对的这么一步的，你实际的啦，你看的都图不的是，明个多你就是给都图嘛了，但是对吧？他嘛对吧？你搞了，对吧？嘛对你搞现在，你其他不能实际啦，
Just the
啊，
pick up the jerk and this corner.
六这个说起，这六怕谁不说起？ 点点对的这么一，让些居民是的什么过去，路马大过去，可能去这么没有居民去了，居民，这个呢对面对么过去了，他提出了点点直接对着，你这么这呢路这么，我提起的呢，就看说其他不能实际了，你看这的都通嘛了，没搞多，天天现在，提起点的中央康。 天天印章是他感觉，让些做吧，但让些没做吧，你他看实际的用嘛，是吧？他感觉点开了两把印章，让些没把开两个，让些做吧开两样嘛，是他看见实际的对吧？的嘛对吧？他这么你刚刚开两是人嘛，是我这样的，我天天印章，天天点的中央看，让些给你多么呢？点的中央的，让些点的中央的，让些给你多么呢？那把样把的让些给。 点的中看，是吧？点的中下就看一把的让心的多么呢？那把人或者让心妹妹，我他妈没把那个让心没把把这么多啥都得看嘛的是，对不中嘛是的，对嘛把人呢，俺种那样的他点把那样，点把么做，中嘛那是通过的时候了哇。
German die Guma de Sigio Marwa.
啊，
German sind die Guma de Sigio
Guma.
Marwa. Kunjob Sigio Marwa.
工作来可出个工作的就乐这你大个什么了？工作。
So now here again, 26 and 27 should be read together, right? So saying that the notion that that an essence, right? A rangshin means an essence or an intrinsic nature, the way translated here. A self-existent essence or nature, one that is not created, right? One that is not produced, right? So one that is exists independently, non-contingent means that it's not dependent on anything else. So saying that those objects that appear to be self-existent, if they were self-existent, right? Then that would mean they do possess some kind of essence, some kind of intrinsic nature. And then that quality is at odds with the doctrine of dependent origination. The doctrine of dependent origination is that things are dependent. Here it says contingent, right? It says that everything is contingent. Nothing has some the self-contained nature, right? And everything is then produced, right? Sharpa means then created by causes and conditions. And there's nothing which is not contingent, nothing which is not created, either conceptually, right, or causally. Then it says, so those two propositions, how could they possibly be made to be compatible? right? To have a self-existent nature which is not produced, which is not contingent. How can you make that idea, that understanding of the way things are, of the nature of entities, how could you make that compatible with the teaching of dependent origination, which states the very opposite of that? So it says, Jitaguna means how. How could those two propositions exist at the same time? Shichik means in one place, right? How could they not be contradictory? How could they be compatible? Asking the question, right? How can those two, when he says converge, it means how can you make those two things fit together on the same object? So that's the same object means the relative truth object, which is a causally produced dependent entity, and its ultimate nature, right? Those two things are fit together, and that empty nature is the very fact that it lacks a self-existence. But here you're saying opposite of that. This is therefore, it says, it must be the case. So he's saying, therefore, what you think is completely, wrong. So therefore, anything which is dependently right? Anything which is dependently originated, everything that originates dependently, right? Then even though it has never, Dharmane means since beginningless time, there has never been a time, here primordially means for all time, everything has lacked a self-existence. Ranshigini, Dharmane, number one means to be lacking, to be without, to be void of, to be and free of any self-existent nature, despite the fact that it appears to have a self-existent nature. Because of that, when the notion that it looks like it's self-existent, that means that for that reason, you described everything as being illusory, right? So you taught all things to be like illusions, meaning they look like something that's real, but they aren't. Yes.
랑시 좀나 타니 따베 따든 세어스는 니주 요거와 데이터 니가 집어 지자니 말 타니 따베 따든 세어스는 니주 랑시 줍세야 돼 랑은 줍 랑이 친유 줍세야 돼 타니 따베 따든 세어스는 니주 요거잖아 랑주가 면제 되게 다
아니,
니구가 니야 요소가 다 같이 유대네 줍어줘리 니조 주고가 랑주바 되라 민기 샤고체 고고레 아니 코랑문을 두바지 뉴조 주고고라 제도 다녔다가 다든서 뉴조 주고고래 로아 다녔다가 다든서 뉴조 주고고 다데 런주 가서 턴주에서는 다 간제 다녔다가 다든서는 뉴조 민도 없어 다 간제 빼나서 가서 그래 나 강사를 제와이나 로 다녔다가 다든서는 뉴조요나 다 닥시도 쟤는 니야 요시고래 예스고라 닥시디 다 풍봉가 나네 쪼다 수분들이 로와 풍봉가 요라 제다 닥시 풍봉가 요라 닥시 이네 쪼 수분들이 가서 매취 통중한 제 채서 수분도 통화될 때네 나딱 닥시 대차고 쪼 닥시 대치다 요도 요라 가서 그래 맞지부터 다리만 세버지부터 셈 닥시 셈 차고라 아니 소화 약부터 셈 가서 닥시 소화 차고라 어디는 시체는 다 망치 수분들을 통는 내초 통해서 망치 다시 대선 거로 뒤에 다 다시 수분데 대나 제고가 다녔다가 딱된 세워서는 예 보고래 그러봐 단 터주로라 수분 세와에네 수분 수주 풍부의 초반의 요배 아니 주지게요마 주지게 대소가 속상되라 수분 딱zam시 차고래 그러봐 뒤에 다 주지게나는 제고가 세나 나세스 녀여베 런지보도 나 녀여서로 이신남시도 많이 쓰고로 뒤인데 다 수분도 제가 다 되게 게나나 제고거래 수분스네 되게 속상되라 수분 딱상 마테르 텔로 수분 요마로 로터ጆ로라 다 되게 게나 다 용도 다 중앙시대 중시시도로 뒤인데 다 중앙 사데레베 말와 추데레베 메데레 룬데다 종시데레레 나레야 말와 다가는 시체나니 아 중주르 아니 속데레베 치데레베 로데레베 레자데레베스나 레야 말와 뒤인데 다 간지 가르쳐 보래 나 세야 돼다 간지 다녔다가 딱된서는 예 면도 다 다녔다가 딱된서 니주는 다 제사 되대 텔라로스 제사 주는 요면도 매연자 다 많이 연애 요를 왔다 연애 요를 다 연애 요에서 다 다녔다가 다들 니주면서 다 민정 다정스 나세야 돼 민대 샤다 민다 다이 샤즈 민정 다정 뭐도 다정지 나래도 텔라로스 나치 다시 텔라 딱점 다가나 나래서 텔라로스 나 민도스 세야시 늘 되질라 담아래 아
Lela marwa.
아,
Lela marwa. Lorna mela na wangi shakta mahim barwa.
아,
Lorna mela wangi.
너는 이런 거 투면 될로 뭐 라주벨로라. 너는 따서 이런 거 투면 될로 가자로. 그걸 라주벨로라.
So, just a subtle point to differentiate the meaning of lack of self-existent nature. We say that things only exist nominally, right? Nominally means takye, not zaye, and minsan means a mere name. Then even the so-called Swatantriga school, the Madhyamika Swatantriga school, the school that believes in independent syllogisms. So they believe that things don't have real essences. But their notion of what that means is less subtle than the Prasangika view. The Prasangika view is the most radical view. So one way to understand what separates them is a phrase which uses the word takpa. Takpa means to ascribe. To ascribe means to identify. So you see something and you say, this is a rug, for example, right? So then that rug is something which is a name, right? So in your mind, there's something about that leads you to, ascribe the term name to that object. And the question becomes, what is that name being ascribed to? What is the object? What is the recipient of the term? So then it says, Tanye Takdun. Tanye Takdun means
타니 딱배.
Tanye Takbe.
딱든.
Takdun.
세베잖아.
So the object that is given a name, that is ascribed with a certain name, says then if you try to identify, well, what is that object? Can we identify the entity that is being referred to by that name? So the Swatantrikas and all the realist schools below that say there must be something that we can identify objectively, at least in a conventional sense, if not in a real sense, that corresponds to what we're talking about. What is the object that's being referred to? Otherwise, how would we differentiate between something that actually exists, even conventionally, and something which doesn't exist at all, like a dream object, say? So they assert that if you try to identify the object of the term that you're using, for example, if you say self, what is the object of the term self when you're talking about your own existence as a person? Say, are you a person? Yes, you are a person. Well, what does your personhood consist of? So, what is the object of the appearance of an I? So, all the other schools, other than the Prasangikas, they will say, well, the basis of your ascription, the basis of using the term I as to refer to a personal self is your own 5 skandhas, right? Your own 5 heaps, starting with your physical body and then all the elements that make up your mental qualities. So you take those things collectively, and then based on your, perception of them, then you form the idea of this particular collection of those 5 skandhas is a person, and I am that. And you refer to yourself as a separate individual person. So then the question becomes, well, what is the status of that individual person that you are identifying for yourself? So then Buddha taught that there's no real personal self. So then what does that mean? What is it to say that the self exists nominally, but it doesn't exist, as a real entity, the way, say, you might think your body or your mind exist. So all the schools, except for Chandakirti and Prasangika school, they will say that if you try to identify what is the object of the term self, you have to find something. And so one way, most of the time when we look at other people, we see other people, we identify them with a body, with their body. That person, you recognize a person by seeing their physical form. And so you call that a person. Usually when you're referring to yourself, or if you think about it in terms of how is there a continuity of your existence, then they'll say, well, it must be your mind, consciousness, because your mind consciousness, the continuum of your mind consciousness is what goes from one life to the next life. So that must be the object of the term self, even though it's not a real self because it's changing from moment to moment. But nevertheless, when we say self, we're referring to that, like that. Then the Prasangikas say that's wrong, and they give many reasons why that's an improper interpretation of the nominal self. So for them, when you try to identify what is the object of the term self, they say you won't find anything. There's nothing objectively that you can discover is the entity or object that corresponds to the term self. It's something that when you perceive your 5 skandhas, you form the idea of a self, but that's purely mentally projected. Tokpe, takpa means your mind, your conceptual mind projects the idea of there being an object that you call a self. And then you identify the term self with that mentally created object. So when they say something is only nominally existent, they mean in that more radical way, in that more profound way, saying that everything is constructed by your dualistic mind. And so that idea of being only nominally existent and not being able to find what the referent is of terms that we use when we perceive things and give them names. That is the we talked about here. When you say you can't find it, the inability to find it represents its true emptiness, lack of any objective status.
Pena kasur ngas kansa saya de berwa pena mare chasar na ngawang jorden laya de humunga kang rongala ka taksam dagarang kansa re modo ngawang jorden dellos ngawang jorden da raya yo mares tenashi pena kibuse joro kibuse de come to yorwa come to deba zam dagarang kibure modo sagame mare 추가면 말에 메가면 룽가면 남바 남시 가야 말에스 텔레셴베니 가서거래 기부 매매로 매우 말에 가서 감독 두바데스 로아 기부삼이 추마에 매매는 남나 남시메 꾸메나 텔레셴의 기부강 기부 감독 두베치스 기부서 감독 두좀디 기부샤고레스 텔레 로스 기부세요 말에스 지시kam네 레레양 아니 가서 뉴지한다 뉴드면서 컴퓨터는 사감을 차샤와는 사감세에 사감 초반에 요래 뉴제제 초점데 사감세 모두 텔레로스에 사감세요 말이 그런 초점데라 사감 따고 따라라레스 뉴제다 같이 집어래디.
So the most frequent description of the nature of a person or self is in relation to the five skandhas. Tene takpa, it's another very famous expression. Humbo ngala tene takpe dak, they'll say, right? The self that is ascribed independence on the five skandhas. There's also another famous, description in a treatise, Nagarjuna's treatise, So Ratnavali is a verse text written by Nagarjuna, another very important text, and it might be the first chapter, I'm not sure, in which he describes so Kibu means
기부도 강사는 집어래. 기부 강사세는
I'm not sure. Kibu usually Pudgala. Pudgala means person.
no person.
So Nagarjuna says the nature of the person, and he uses, instead of the five skandhas, he says the six constituents. Kamdruk. So those six constituents are the four elements, and then consciousness, and then or mind, and then space. Right? Namkarwa.
남세. And
So space in the person means like the space opening in your ear and in your nose, like that. They're empty. Inside your body, there's empty space. That's part of you, right? So then the four elements are mainly the physical constituents of the body. And then when you use the word consciousness, he's talking about all the elements of your mind. And so he uses the word collection. Duva, duva means the collection or the combination of those six constituents is the basis for referring to someone as a person. But it's the person is just a name, mere name, which is assigned to that collection of those six constituents, which happen to be arranged in some particular way that was identified as a living being. Otherwise, there is no other thing which constitutes a person. And likewise, then the text goes on to say the same thing is true for each of those six constituents. There's no real earth constituent. So the earth element can be analyzed into its parts, which are namely, in the conventional sense, made up of then atoms, physical atoms. And those physical atoms collectively make up the physical body, and then atoms of earth in particular. So the four elements are atoms, and then each atom is made up of 8 components. So each in Buddhist doctrine, classic doctrine, is every atom of physical matter is made up of 8 qualities. So the 4 elements, and then the secondary qualities are the quality that produces the ability to be seen, the quality that produces the ability to be smelled, the quality that produces quality of being touched, and quality of being able to be tasted. So those are secondary qualities. And each atom is made up of a combination of those attributes. And so then you can break down each one of those attributes as well. And it goes on and on and on without end. So therefore, there's nothing that can be identified objectively as real, either in form, and same goes for feelings and all the mental constituents. So this is another analysis which Nagarjuna gives about how to understand the nature of the selflessness of the person, and then continuing with analysis of each of those six constituents, then also the selflessness of entities.
this
That's-
당을 되는 말 좋아한다.
that's-
다 되셔라. 춘지 제다 땜발라. 고아 가자 춘도 라미니를 송바야. 대내진에 라바kum. 실내진에 대시베 통도 마동고 볼라 돈도 봐도 본주 고거를 이제 제시로서 다 초지 제다 땜발라 다 가지고 동바된주 동배 돈도 제다 땜바 나신 고아 괜찮니? 추도 된다 보내 아니 아 랭가 저바자 메바디 램 가서 라미니를 송바야. 다 다가랑 되게 가서 대내진에 라바kum 텔라테네 동바된주 그 송바 다가랑 되는 하고 그도 라바kum 송 라바셔서 Chile, junze Chile china, di Chile china di shebe, ta tongpa ting, tongpa nyi kasu kore, tenze zhuwa junze la dina tongpa nyi sheba tiki, di shebe, tongwa ngunjur, ani ma tongwa, tongwa ngunjur che, ma tongwa, ani chungse gujur, ani shindu gujur, ngobo la, ani ktere ngobo tela, ta kanche rangshe jo yoba joto la ta, 아니 랑셰지 미오 마레스라고 간제 셰제네 숨다래 셰제네 숨다 랑셰 요바 도 바다 셰제네 숨 라시 요 마레스 가티도 요 마레스 근데 아니 코가 마레도 그래도 부터 텐데 자메 봐아 세마레스 어디지라다 통한 문조세는 다 간제 가지고 무슨 통해야 돼 통식 로아 중세 구조세 따라 되네 제발 되는 로아 이거 되는
The songs and the Choeje Lamminyo song bus and the Chitan song bus.
라미베 송바양
Denikini like
Denikini.
the Duxian Hagoya Restigar. Oh, yeah, the Javasungi Tapas.
뭐 되게되는 라고품서 간제 전화 숨바 텔라테네 아니 간제 디
And it's
제가숨 타거든
So now 28 and 29, again, a lot of these are pairs of verses that should be read together. So he says, in this very way, right? Here it says, through this very fact, but the fact is in the next verse. So it says, what is said is that as you have taught, meaning in your doctrine, means in the way that the Buddhist teaching, has been recorded, you could even say, right, in its entirety. Then it says to say, right? It is said, it is declared. Let's see, what do we have here? The statement here, he says, the statement in the second line. The statement is that no opponent, right? Yeah, opponent. There's no opponent who can correctly, chotundu means correctly, find some fault. Lak nyeva means to find some, chink in your teaching, some quality about your teaching that is false or fallacious, right? So no one can find fault with your teachings. How is this said? He says, this is how I have understood this. And that's, so this means the next. How is this so? How is it that we can make such a statement? He says, and then in the second line in the Tibetan refers to an ancient Indian distinction between what is called that which is seen and that which is unseen. So that which is seen doesn't necessarily mean with your eyes. It means that which can be directly perceived. That which occurs in this life is that which is seen, that which ordinary persons can confirm from their everyday experience. Then that which is unseen means that which is beyond ordinary perception. So, for example, selflessness is something that is not directly perceivable, but through reasoning, it can be established. So even though it's not directly perceivable, it is hidden, unseen, but accessible through correct. Then there is a second category of unseen, which is more subtle, is called Shinto Kokyo. Shinto Kokyo means extremely hidden. Then that mainly refers to more subtle workings of cause and effect, including karma, including being able to see through the vastness of time and space, which only the Buddhas, omniscient Buddhas, are able to do. So those are the three categories of knowable objects. One category, that which is seen, and two categories which are called unseen. Future life, for example, you can't see. Most people cannot see what their next life is going to be like. So that is also considered something that is unseen. But Buddha, in his teaching, in his entire teaching, everything that he said about those three categories of seen things and those that were unseen, he says there is nothing about those three categories which Buddha, superimposed that doesn't exist. Rondopa means to falsely ascribe something which doesn't exist. Purandeva means to reject something which actually exists. So there's nothing in the Buddha's teachings which he said, which he, is an exaggeration, you can say, or which is describing something which actually doesn't exist. Nor did he deny or reject something which does exist. And nothing about those three categories of knowable things are those false, can't be found anywhere. Therefore, we can say that no opponent can find any valid basis for delegitimizing the Buddha's teaching.
다 Choje 마와 다음에 봐 토연 균제 된중게 람디 니지 숭셴야 참아주와 냐바케스 다 Choje 마와 다음에 봐 다 간제 된제 도와주면 균제를 되네 동반이 된송아 마와 다음에 봐대 토연 균제지 아니 된중게 람디 니지 숭셴야 다 된중 람텔라 되네 다 간제 동반이 내야 숭텔라야 아니 텔라 되네 숭셴야 참아니 니 두고레스 다도 덤베 다 간제 된저 도와주고 숭바 텔라 되네 아니 랑심에 봐 녜베 아니 녜 투바 텔라 숭텔라 되네 참아셴야 아니 참아야 봐 덤베 숭셴다도 참아네 봐 근데 저 돌아 밀로치 현라 저서 봐봐 예스 남자 중으로 저 돌아 밀로치 현라 저서 봐봐 예스 근데 저 대시 랑도 내라 친제 말로 된 투바이나 다 배벌도 그 참아인 바래 티나시 전에 단도 조송야 돼 동가 된주 돈라 아니 참아인데 아니 참아신데 숭신데 참아다라 샤투 그래서 소시
십자가는 그냥 동반이 땜바 인장.
된저 도와주고 텔티 조제 텔라데는 동반이 땜바 인장
땜바다 셔모.
텔라 대야요 마타 신다도 참아 가서 네투 그래서
So verse 30, sorry, is still kind of addressing the same point about the overall infallibility of the Buddha's teaching. So the verse 29, if I'm not mistaken, is following the Pramanavartika explanation of the Buddha's authoritative nature, right? So there's a Jevasum Dakpe Lung, right? Jevasum Dakpe Lung, see right? So there's a description which is saying we have faith in the Buddha's speech, the Buddha's teachings, because they are teachings. Lung means the spiritual teaching, which can be verified to be pure. Pure means unerring, using three kinds of analysis. This is mainly referring to verse 29. That kind of explanation is in the Pramanavartika. Then the verse 30 is more in line with the middle way school position, but it's making the same point. It says, in the end, it says Nyabakye means I gave rise to a certainty, means a sense of then no uncertainty, right? Completely, then I feel confident that all of your teachings are true. All of your teachings are pure and valid. But in verse 30, he says, another basis for gaining that determination, gaining that certainty is this very teaching. It says, it says, previously, in a previous verse, it referred to the Buddha as Mawadame. Mawadame means the unsurpassed, right? The fact that your speech and you as a teacher are unparalleled. The reason that I had for understanding that and identifying you that way is because you taught dependent origination. I says the reason is, right? This is the rationale for your speech being peerless. It says, right, is this very path of dependent origination. So the poem is about dependent origination. So it's like this very teaching of dependent origination, which represents the path by which I realize that you are the peerless, right? Dame means no one can compare to you as a teacher. He says that very realization, Toma, means when I realized that, by virtue of that realization, then I was also able to ascertain that Sung Shen Yang means all your other teachings are Tsemargyurba. Tsemargyurba means valid, or means correct, means true.
That's what.
Yes.
That dunshi singne le sumba choje jesu loba la goba tamje rindu ju nyugun zawa doje choje denle choje denle choje be yure ngawa tenche ja choje jona beba shin dado tawa tenche emo kebe tiniji keba kondo choje ba teze kange kone ni chola choje kumi jurus wadadi tonda chikwa yinba tisumdi ta dunshi singne le sumba 다 레스와 추지술라발라 다 전천한 된시 된다 제마 지신 시거톤에 맞아 이거 송와텔라 아니 나제스 로바텔라서 다 간제 다 대제 도와주면 준젤라 때네 다 간제 동반이 송바티 전화다 차상 돌로 추네 아니 마 송바텔라 아니 추지 제스 로발라 네 전화기 제스 로바텔라 아니 네게 다 구바 수도 네게 코에 구바 링도 타 링도 두고 도스 대선도 마세 이게 자와데 독도 도스 이게 자와 독시로스 대 최지 때래 최조배 다 교란게 땡샤죠 때래 로가 갑대 차땡게 유령아와 땡체자 유령부 갈래 가주 자와 얘네 치지jö나 버바시 견도서 강가 수께 당원의 시 랑쇼기 견망 벌렉도 치지jö나 버바시 베바는 시초 레고도 대전도 마서 다도 따와데 때로 도도 다도 따와 텐셔로스 에모 케베다 에모 케베 디니지 텐데 인자 당 모자와서 다 가서 에모 케베 아니 디니 하고 쳐버리 에모 케베 디니지 케바 콘도 추주바다 에모 케바 든저다 딘데 케바 요바데 라 가서 텐제 도와주에 준제제 랑신 메바 도야다 텐제 도와주 랑신 도바도 분이 케바데 하고에 토네 케바 콘에 케바 콘도 추주바 대적가는 콘에니 텐데 인자 저는 저를 지주 금을 줘서 대적강이 준제 대전하는 저를 수 구셔면 강가 저를 그거를 그걸 했어요 소식 저를 지지를 금을 줬어
Um, so these next three verses, before we start talking about them, I just wanted to add something that what you mentioned about the previous discussion by which Je Tsongkhapa is addressing the fact that he feels this great conviction about the entirety of the Buddha's teaching as being valid. And so that subject is very important. on one hand, it's the basis for developing faith in karma, believing in karma. And also, a second point that's made here is that part of that kind of that topic, which is where it is something that requires analysis, something you have to examine the Buddha's teaching in order to reach that level of understanding. And then another way that this point is made is to say, if you, Buddha, are the only person who is on his own, who discovered and taught such profound doctrines as selflessness and dependent origination and emptiness. So when we understand those teachings, which are not easy to understand, but when we get some level of understanding, appreciation of them, then we can feel comfortable to say, right? Why would the Buddha, mislead us about other points that are less important? Those points are the ones that bring our salvation. Those are the points that free us from, our suffering. So why would the Buddha then, speak falsely about subjects like karma, for example? So that's another. Yeah, it's important to understand that particular subject. So Rinpoche made reference to it, and I didn't kind of express it. So I wanted to go back to it. Sorry. So now it says here something similar. It's like Tsongkhapa is expressing his great appreciation and his great sense of wonder, his great sense of inspiration about the Buddha's teachings. Again, all of it flowing or stemming from his insight into dependent origination. So it says, the first verse 31, the first of these three, verse 31 says, it says, what was your method of teaching? What you taught is you taught what you yourself realized. You yourself realized things the way they truly were. And then once you gained that realization of reality, then you taught others. So your teaching is based on your own direct realization, he says. And because of that, then the persons who train themselves, Jesulova means to follow your example, who listen to your teaching and try to proceed and gain your own spiritual development in the way that you taught. He says, what Tsongkhapa recognizes that if that's done correctly, then everyone who does that, his or her suffering, mentioned in the very second verse maybe, said that the source of all misfortune is ignorance, right? So this is the same word, misfortune. Gurvat Tamje Ring Dupur means all misfortune, all your suffering you will be able to leave it behind, very far behind. You will be able to go beyond it. And it says, why? Because the source, the root cause of all of all of the mental faults, which are the main cause for suffering, will have been reversed. It means Buddha's teaching you the way to free yourself from suffering by overcoming the root cause of all suffering, ignorance, as well as all the other related mental flaws of the mental afflictions. So that's just kind of generally, a way to think of, as the followers, what is the benefit of being what you can say. And then he says, on the other hand, those persons who are turned away from your teaching, those persons who reject your teaching, right? Choeje means those persons who are following a different path, right? No matter how much much effort they make, no matter how much practice they try to undertake, then those efforts will, instead of, leaving behind faults and freeing yourself from suffering, those efforts are like summoning more suffering, right? As a chichir burba, it's like calling from, my practice is like, summoning all of those bad faults, right? As if being called forth means your efforts are like you want suffering to come. It's like you're asking for more suffering, he says. And the reason is because all of those practices that are different from your teaching are based on Datu Tao. Datu Tao means believing in a real, in this case, Datu Tao Sendi Dangxing, right? So this is not just belief in personal. Datu Tao means Datu Tao means to believe, to have a view that's based on the notion that things are real. And it says because any practice other than the Buddhist practice is going to be a practice that is making that most fundamental error stronger and more firm. And the more firm you make that belief in self-existent essences, then the more likely you are to perpetuate your own misery. And then it says the third verse, the next verse, 33, is then comparing the two. And he here, he gives he gives an English version of Emaho. He says, aha. I said, wow. He says, Emaho. So this is wonderful to see the difference between the pure teaching of the Buddha, which came from his direct realization of the way things really are, versus any other path system. He says, then any learned person, any wise person, he says, when they recognize the difference between these two approaches, how following your doctrine will free you from suffering, and following any other system that's based on believing in real essences will only perpetuate suffering. He says, a person who recognizes that distinction properly from the marrow in their bones, right? Gangi Kong means Gang means marrow, right? That means from the most deepest part of your being. Wouldn't that cause you to feel great reverence for the Buddha's teaching? When you see how it's saying this is the only true way. It's basically what it's saying.
다 조선 도마 지시면 차셰레야 된zam랑 오지 잠지 내년바 내가 초게 대화들 그 달로 몸배 좀 근데 연대 풍부라 리네 잡수 송조장 연대 차장 기타 카르조베 소그 준네 말려봐 소그 준네 말려봐 졸라 중세 이제베 대학에 와서냥 지스 다 추송 도마 지시면 다 간지 좀더 되게 다 송샤죠 다 도마 시고 좀 샤죠데 망고 좀 해요 얘네 내 차세를 된담랑 차세를 다 된담라 아니 된지 샤워 소소 야바니거든 야바니바 내가 되게 안에 소소를 초게 대화 지고 도스다 간지 초게 대화 때 그 달로 몸배 좀가 된다 그 달로 몸배 좀 봐인 좀 봐네 아 되게 연대 풍부라 다 소소요 가도 몸바디 좀배 genji 되게 연대다 되게 풍부들라 아니 이렇게 잡서도 보고 이네 연대 차선 아 마세도서 연대 차선 많이 소소라 다요 말했어 얘네 원장 치다 칼초에 졸라 원장 치다 칼초에 속을 주는 말로 졸라 중도 이제 대학에 다 원장 치다게 봐 신지 치다 칼초에 내가 보다는 속을 주 많이 보대라 아니 졸라 중세 이제거든요 아니 껴서 좋아다 다 되는 제바되는 깨봐 상불인 어떤 정도 있어요.
So then again, Je Tsongkhapa is kind of addressing the Buddha's teaching as a whole and how precious he views it from his own point of view. Again, 34, 35, and 36 read together. 34, he makes a general comment. He says, first in the first line of Tibetan, he says, no need to say about an abundance of your teachings, or a large amount of your teachings. Kusum Duma. Duma means a large amount of your teachings, an abundance of your teachings. I don't say if you study a great amount of Buddha's teaching, then you will be filled with great benefit. He says, needless to say, Chishik there's wise, what need is there to say? He says, even some small point, even some brief description, each individual statement which the Buddha made, if you understand the meaning of just like one sentence of it, even for that, he said, and not only that, if your understanding is only partially, good, it's only it says cursory way, right? It means even if you only have a cursory understanding of just some small part of the Buddha's teaching, that has the ability to bestow great bliss on you as a Buddha's follower, he says. So that's saying Buddha's teaching is the source of every kind of happiness, even one small part of the Buddha's teaching, he says. And then now he talks about himself, kind of in a self-deprecating way. He says, he starts out with another explanation. Kihu is like, woe is me, right? He says, alas. He says, Dalo mong be chom. It says, I am one whose mind has been destroyed by or overcome by my own ignorance. So it's saying I'm not wise. I'm subject to ignorance. So he says, it's such a great mass, such a great heap, right? This is talking about the Buddha's teaching as a whole. Maybe the Buddha's teaching 84,000 heaps of teachings, right? Such the incredible good qualities that come from the Buddha's teaching. He says, I have taken refuge in the Buddha's teaching for a long time. Gyaltsu Songyurchan Ringne means for a long time I have taken refuge in the Buddha's teaching, but only a small amount of those qualities have I been able to achieve, right? Yonten Chazam Matsuto. I do not even possess knowledge of a fraction of those qualities. So he's saying Buddha's teaching is so extraordinary and difficult to comprehend in its fullness, right? And he says, nevertheless, he says, nevertheless, he says, until, right? Chidak har chokbe sok bigyun manupar. That's a very poetic way of saying until I die, right? It's saying my life force, right? The life spark of life that keeps me alive. That's a sok, right? Is something which, nevertheless, even though I am still alive, I and all other samsara beings are racing towards their demise, towards their death, towards meeting with the Lord of Death, he says. However, until my life force is extinguished, right? Gunni Manuba, as long as it hasn't been extinguished, as long as I'm still alive, he says, whatever slight here belief, here means faith, whatever slight conviction, there are different kinds of faith. Yicheva means to believe, but it's not just believe. It's like have very strong, firm conviction about the Buddha's teaching. Then the fact that I have, and I will continue to have even small amount of faith, that I feel very fortunate for having been able to achieve that.
Tatumbe nane tende dumbatam. Sharap nana tende shabani. Jigdan thana geo ombushi. Pusun lebar Choeje shinji means. Tatumbe nane anin tende lebar. Anin lebar dumbatam. Sharap nani tene labar shabani, ta jigden dina lani gyawa ongu sanje choran nangshi, sanje chumde choran nangshi, ane putu choya, ane labar, chazan ane tongpa tenjo tuya, chazan kenge chö moda shen suje yo mara, chö ken shenji mitsi, shenge deri kenge mara es.
Gyawa Wangwa Sandy, Gyawa Sandy,
Ah,
Gyawa Wangwa Sandy, Gyawa Sigiwa, Sandy Koran Dushav Didi, Gyawa Nanshi Sandy.
gyawa ongu nangshi de ta kanje,
Gyawa Wangwa, Gyawa Wangwa.
gyawa ongu.
Gyawa Wangwa. Gyawa Wangwa is that Sangye Nani.
Ah,
Sangye Nani, Sangye Chotu Gyoba Sandy.
sanje na sanje cho, ta gyawa ongu su, gyawa su de ta dushi le gyawa, sanje su go ra, ta
Okay.
gyawa ongu shin.
So now verse 37, still, Je Tsongkhapa is praising the Buddha Shakyamuni, saying, Puljum, lekbar ken shengi min. Let's see. Hang on, Ngandi kala tabar si logi o mar so di lamsan di calling o mar. Tomena na tende tomba shirana na tende sheva ni chicken dan gyawe lambo.
Ta tumbe nani, ta tende legwa tumba de ta, shiram nani tende legwa shea tini, ta jide tani gyawa ongu, sanje chumde de, yani cho putu chunga, kenpa di chola lao kenge tende shi yo ma res, ta shinge shi yo ma res.
Lekbar chicken sen di gyawa di shaket tubala. Berba sort.
Uriwa, loko chochen. Chochen, shenji min, shinda ta, chirubala suwa de tumba tenda la, shinda la yo ma res ura.
Lekbar chicken. So, Kenan Tomena Kenan Tomba Yakshu Yimban, Kenan Shira Yakshu Yamati, Kenan Kiyo, Shimbadi King of this Yoman. Karasa. Putin, like what Ken,
Chochen, shenji min, cho kema na shen ma res. Ta shen ta chirubala ta kan shinda de. Tumba mango yoro ta.
Okay. So this verse is seems to be saying, I know this, I don't know this poem that well. So I'm reading the verse and I'm not necessarily, familiar with every point. So here it's verse 37. So it says, among the teachers, the one who taught dependent origination, this is referring to Buddha, of course. And then among all the different kinds of wisdom, and there can be wisdom, knowledge about many, many different things. The highest and most important kind of wisdom is the wisdom that realizes dependent origination, right? Teaching dependent origination and knowing dependent origination are the highest kind of teaching and the highest kind of knowledge. And then it says, then you are like here it says king of the world. The Tibetan doesn't say, usually king is Gyalpo, and this says Gyalwa. So I'm not sure. It says you are like the lord of victorious ones, if you take it literally, in the world, among the victorious ones. Usually that's a reference, a way of describing a Buddha, not an ordinary king. Then it says, Puljung. He repeats it twice for emphasis and also to refer to the two teachings and wisdoms, right? So the teaching of dependent origination is Puljung means the highest, the most excellent. Most excellent teaching and knowledge of dependent origination That also is highest knowledge, Puljung kind of knowledge. That's most excellent knowledge. So here he says, you are the most excellent. So then it says, you know, you know this well. You know this well, that those are the most important teachings and those are the most important knowledge. I think I would take it that way, right? You know that this is the most important thing to teach because it benefits beings. You know this is important, most important knowledge to have because that knowledge is what frees beings from their suffering. And therefore, that makes you, the highest among the victorious ones in the world. And no one else is comparable to you.
그래서
Can't you read that?
다 뒤쇼라 초제 진에 가자봐 땡땡이에 쌈대주 대량 양에 대제도 시주를 매제 졸라메스 다 초제 진에 가자봐 저랑가 가서 숨바도 진에 가자봐데 땡땡이래 다 대시 가서 대시 최고 숨네 숨바네 숨데 다 가래 숨바 강가 땡땡이라 땡땡이라 땡네 다 동반이 동야고 뒤에 탑샤지 숨어요 땡땡이래 쌈대주 대량 안에 시험에는 양을 대학쳐도 시줄 매제 수도 다 간지 가서 동네 여시에 니시 여시에 대학쳐도 말해 시줄 매제 졸라 매스티 쳐도 졸라져요 말해서 다 주지 지내가 되는이라 잠내 저 준조로 송하는 양라 대다 탐전이 투배 셔도 돈도 송수직 송하러 와 그니 집벌 양라 대다 탐전이 아니 투배 셔도 돈도 송수
Tensa,
아
Karasa, Mahamudra sana kar.
Choje.
자생기 짜나, 자생기 karasa, pension was a chicken, standard now, Darang, the lawyer. This verse 38 is the Devanan Shubhi Jeremy Shiralew Gubana, this really, I just read, well, don't need to tell you, but it's very excellent point. So here it says, whatever you taught, everything that you taught, all that you have taught, this translation, all of it is based upon gaining realization of dependent origination. And that here, dependent origination means emptiness. To understand subtle dependent origination, which is emptiness. All of the Buddha's teachings are focused on directly or indirectly bringing his followers to that summit of realizations of ultimate truth. So then the first verse of Shantideva's 9th chapter in the Bodhicaya Avatara, Shantideva says, then all the verses that came before, all the chapters that came before, the first 5 paramitas, he says about them, means all of these, the word's limbs, it means all these related subjects, all of these other teachings. Then all of them, purpose for teaching them is to bring you to the place where you can realize wisdom, especially wisdom about ultimate truth. Then the Tsongkhapa has commentary to the 9th chapter. Then he talked about what that line means, those 2 lines. Very beautiful. These 2 lines, exactly the same meaning. And he says then, so that all of them, they're I should say geared to, but that's kind of a coarse way to describe it. So they're all then meant to lead you to understanding subtle dependent origination. And so why? It says, because it is to bring you to the purpose for teaching dependent origination is to lead you to the goal of nirvana. And two kinds of nirvana. And then it says, there's no activity, right? Ze here means zevatinle, right? Shigul means that there's nothing that you have done. There's no activity that you have engaged in. Then this mainly speech. Buddha's speech activity is his most precious teaching, is most among the Buddha's deeds. Then the deed of teaching the Dharma is the most important. So there's no speech, no teaching activity which you gave that is not then meant to bring peace, bring beings to state of terminating all their imperfections and suffering.
你就说，
Yeah?
我确实电话呢，行业那个朗诵吧，台大他们这写就是确定什么数目个是，他我是就他就结果来打我操吧，确实电话呢，行业那个就让送下就电话的呢，但那个朗读送完了，台大他们这아니 미네면 양을 토비하게 아니 된데 시줄 가서 그래 녀몬로 소와데라 시어주 탑셔지 템바 셔지 레샤스 최된 zemba 수무고 졸아니 최된 zem바들라니 마고 수요레스 최된 zemba 수무고스 어디치라타.
So still now it's praising the teaching, Buddha's teaching as a whole, right? Again, but here he says, alas, this one shouldn't be alas, this one should be, is that what he said before? What did he say before? His exclamations. Aha!
Yeah.
Aha! This should be aha, not alas. So here it says, so this should, aha should it means, oh wonder, so how wonderful. Does what's wonderful is saying from the point of view of the listeners. Then it says whatever portion of your teaching should enter into it says ear path, right? But it means whatever teaching you might hear, right, through your ears. Because what comes into your ears comes into your mind and you understand it. When you receive it that way, those teachings will bring you peace, because all of those, hearing everything that enters your ears, which in the form of the Buddha's teaching, all of that will cause you to experience some kind of peace.
Is that only an oral transmission? Or is that
Not necessarily, but it's talking about the teaching which is given verbally.
Okay.
Because that brings peace, then what person would not want to uphold your teaching respectfully? Who would not have respect about preserving your teaching, right? So here it says, who would not be honored to uphold your teaching? It means you should, when you recognize that, you should feel that the Buddha's teaching is something that is so precious, I have to do something to try to preserve it.
팔고 타다 좀바당 따로 간도 동바다 지구 전에 대자바 루드 코 조아 펠스 다 페주고 칸데주네 안 타다 좀 도그도스 따오 간도 자원이면도 간도 강가 동그도스 지구라 아니 되니 때 도그도스 다 되느냐 되니 루드 코 조아 펠티는 루드라 코 조아 쇼시 가그도스
딱꼭 갈수요. 딱꼭 강도.对的我. 강도. 딱요 땡당 워. 알레.
따고선 땡오
땡워.
숨쉬져 땅도 마부셔로 성 땡오 간도
몰랐어. So verse 40, we're still praising the Buddha's speech and feeling a sense of joy towards its wonderful nature. So it says, the first half of the verse is describing its effect. What does it accomplish? So it says it defeats, right? Here it says overcomes. It defeats or overcomes all opponents, right? Pego, all those who try to challenge it. If you study the teaching and learn the teaching contains everything in it to withstand any criticism from opponents, right? Then it says, "Da guo." So from the earlier part and later part, from different parts of the teaching, there's nothing in which one part, it says one thing in one place, and in another place it says the opposite, the contradiction. There's no such contradiction. It's free of those kind of inconsistency. There's nothing about the Buddha's teaching where you can find any contradiction or inconsistency. And then the third quality is Kivu Derni. Kivu Derni, Tati Rangdon Shendo Siyorbe. Rangdon Shendo.
Martini,
Derni says on it? Rangdon Shendo.
Mariman, Tuni,
Oh, they do Derni do.
Tuni, Jibu Tuni to the Tuni is the under Ramdation, Tuni,
They Derni.
Teshaba, Ale Tuni in Jibaji. Tuni is the Ramdation, Tuni Tarchaba says.
So then here in the third line, it says it bestows the two aims on beings. So the two aims are the two goals that Mahayanists are seeking. Each Mahayanist wants to achieve Buddhahood so that they can benefit others. And then after they do, they can then their activities on behalf of others then fulfills others' aims. And that's Dönyi. So the Buddha's teaching then gives you that ability. So it says about this system. This system.
Tuni said never the third of Tuni.
Really?
No, never, Tuni.
Okay. Another way to take those two aims is temporary and ultimate aims. Temporary and ultimate aims. It bestows temporary and ultimate aims that all beings have. Those are not contradictory either. At any rate, it says two aims. And then it says, so those three qualities in particular, then Tsongkhapa is saying, it causes my, joy. It causes my, joy. So joy. My, feeling of appreciation about this system. About this system means about the Buddha's teaching.
This one.
That's all.
Joyful.
Diche do Choje ne lala ku da shenji so, shendo so, dobe nyen da longje so, chame keba yang tang sta, diche do da kaso gore da, sanje ya che do, kechen chame su do so sa rwa da, diche do tongba dinju tongbe tuen do da, kan diche do Choje ne lala ku da, lala ka so, ane dobe nyen da longje da de la so ba, da chame ba da, kechen chame su so dang yang da, chame ba dang yo re, yang dang yo re.
So verse 41 describing then what the Buddha, what kind of generosity the Buddha practiced throughout countless eons in order to achieve the knowledge that comes with enlightenment. And gave him the ability to teach dependent origination. So it says, for the sake of this goal, right, for the sake of this ultimate purpose, then throughout countless eons, repeatedly, right, again and again. So, second line, again and again over countless eons, you have been willing to then be the word for generosity is then to share, right? To give up whatever you have for the sake of others, to benefit others, right? So it says, in some cases, you gave up your body. So that would mean gave up limbs, gave up parts of your physical body for those who needed it. In some cases, you gave up your life. The story of the giving his life to save the lioness who was starving with her cubs. That's a bodhisattva. And then it says also, it says even your family, you should, a bodhisattva should even be willing to, in the bodhisattva bhumi, the rangi, karasa kemen da rangi buddhi, siya tang chogare te paman di tang chog mare sumare.
아, 수파마.
Paman tang chog
아,
mare.
딴거 말.
The Johnson So here it says, your dear kin. Dear kin means your relatives, your family. And Asanga's Bodhisattva Bhumi, in that chapter on generosity, he says that you should be willing to give up your wife, your spouse. You should be willing to give up your own children, but not your parents. And then it says, and then also all your wealth, all whatever wealth you have, you gave the Buddha. Here he's referring to the Buddha. So you gave up your wealth countless times for the sake of achieving those ultimate aims yourself and benefiting others as you did so.
그래서
Let's
다 되면 내 가서 그랬다. 강게 연대 통화이 자주 냐라 지신도 니지 투다 최대니 최라마도 개와신 디냥의 수준이 두바 볼라 마이 제소 송화 지신도 나게 이니 동매자 초라 내가 조선 상반나 쳔베베제럽도 bar 어제 자와 용고에 동바디 상야지 디니데더 숭냠도 일라 투베 수년의 샤워상을 사와이 돈라 다서신 대담에도 정화 이스타 돈저강 지기 막 콕직 다 강교 연대 통화이 다 중대대 강교 연대 통화이 아니 저주 냐게 저 고관의 지치나 되려 저주 냐라 지신도 니내 툭도 내
니 샌데 랑기 니기 툭스는 랑기 툭죠.
니주도 자 중대대 가서 단다디
제일 먼저
제르버지 니즈로 하지 니주 툭당 최대네스 저주 냐라 지신도 니주 툭당 아니 최대니 철라마도 최딘 투드 당 최딘이 다 최송해야 돼. 다 좀대대 무슨 셰니 다 최송해야 저러. 뒤에 아니
최ran 차는
최딘이 철라마도 개와신스 다 가지 다 좀대대 셰슈와 가는데 매와 인자디 개와 빼면서 셴보레스. 다 뒤에 냥에 결과 뒤에 냥에 수진이 두베불라 마이 제수소와 지준 다게 있는 거는 아마칠 부구칠에 메나 다 아마칠 부구치 암 부구치부터 다 간지 나사다 가리체네 냥의 쇼용으로 시라 있는 거 어디는 시체는 말라 텐데 총소스 대 냥의 수진이 두배 볼라 마이 제수소만 지준도 다게 있는 군도 다게 있는 동메 차스 어다 대 냥의 땅 마소스 델랑 초송 삼바나 셈베베제라도 봐 어제 제가 연구해 텐데 이나야 초송 삼바나 초송 송데도 삼로 땅용도 삼바나 생다 빼제기 제네 아니 간지 가서 그래 생다 빼제기 제네 럽도 바에 토네 아니 어제 자가 나네 아니 어제 자와 용수 꼬에 나네 아니 돈바티기 송창양게 토네 마 아드 돈바티 상야지 디네데다 송냥고 된지 되고도스 디네데다 송냠도 일로 투베 송년에 샤워자 데데데 토네 아니 일로 투베 송년에 샤워 잠지 아니 샤워 잠야 차에 동라스타 가서 다외 다세나 뻔님 가서 그래 gonda 다외 송년 때가 아니 시부 소거로 어테나 시ችን 사와이 동라 동대도 아니 다세 포관에시 다세 포관에시 다외에서 포관나시 메 대달 메도 중화레스 메 되게 대달 메도 중화 되게 메도 중화 있어 어떻게 봐도 제 대달 메도 중화 있어
Okay, so 42, verse 42, is Tsongkhapa's describing his feeling about toward the Dharma. Right? He says, when I see, so he uses a relative pronoun of which, the qualities of which means of which teaching, right? Of which Dharma. Says the qualities of which Dharma through being seen pull my heart like as a hook does to a fish. Here it says nigitu kan. Here it is from your heart. Nigitu. Well, I thought Rinpoche said that when I recognize the value, the extraordinary qualities of the Dharma that you taught, it's like a hook that I'm like the fish. It pulls me, and then it says this Dharma. Those who didn't have the opportunity to hear the Dharma from you, how unfortunate they are, right? Unfortunate they are for not having been able to hear it from you. May not hear it from you directly, maybe saying like that. And then he says, 대인양의 숙지 두배부 대수성 자기 동체. That's the German Karsa, German Chegi, Joshaka to most similar to the resource. So he's reflecting.
Jene, that's the answer.
No.
Most Jene, saying what do that?
So he's kind of he's expressing regret, you could say, right? Regret that he was not able to hear this unbelievable teaching directly from the Buddha himself, right? So he's saying the sorrow, right? The intensity of sorrow. This is exactly what he translated, right? The intensity of that sorrow is like that which a mother has for her dear child, right? So if that child is sick and the mother's, tormented by it, like that. So I feel that way towards your teaching, and I feel a sorrow for not having been able to hear it directly from you. Nevertheless, he says, and then this is 36, I think 36. No, sorry. Flipping pages wrong. 44 and 45. It says, when I reflect on your speech, when I reflect on your teaching, when I reflect on your words, it says here, right? He said, then it says, it causes me to have the following thought, right? He says, Tembe pelgi raptubar, rikitawa yongkorwe, dambate sayanki, dini titar, sung nyamjo. I imagine, I think is what it's saying, I imagine what it must have been like to see you, right, with your unbelievable physical qualities, and then your divine speech. It's called Brahma Gosha. Brahma Gosha has 64 qualities. He says, I only can, read the scriptures about what you taught, but imagine what it must have been like to sit in your presence, and if I had, what it would have been like, right? So it says when I even form an image in my mind, yila means in my mind, and I visualize the image of the Buddha, and I have just a mental picture of the Buddha. It says even that, right? It's like there's a common simile that so India is a very hot country. If you go out in the noonday sun, the heat is very strong and torments you. So at nighttime, then the moonbeams, white moonbeams, are soothing. They can soothe the heat of the sun of mental afflictions. And here it's that here the affliction that the Buddha is feeling is the regret that he was not able to hear words directly from the Buddha. But when he thinks about it, even just to visualize the Buddha, that soothes him. He finds that it says it soothes me just as the moon rays heal fever. Here it's not fever; it's just heat, the torment of heat. That as the moonbeams at night, and the night's cool, and you see the moonbeams like soothing. Right? Then it says. So such a made joint, Luke Sang, this is now verse 46, Tsongkhapa is reflecting on the Buddha's teaching as a whole. So this marvelous, this extraordinary, this wonderful system, this wonderful doctrine.
그래서 다 단다데 대담면도 좋아해. 로산 대야 미케베 교버버서 나바군도 증벌체 수도 통해서 대윤도다 대담에도 좋아다 로상고대다 덴제 좋아 중거데 대담에도 좋 로상고대 덴제 좋아 중 남바샤고데므레 오 대다고데라 미케베 교 배바 자신도서다 배바 자신도 나바군도 증 배바 수도다 단다데도 가서 그래 디어로 가서 부유죠 되려 열어 어디다 자망고 대존의 자강가 기니가 나야 자 어디는시 매바 저 매바 자신도 어디저 나보고는 저 어디나 지도 저모도 증대거로 어디는시 지네 저 매바 자신도 나보고도 증바치고 레스다 저 배바죠.
Sorry, just this I think some typos in it. 요 매번 자신들로 학교 말 항상 대한 미패배서 안에 대양을 봐 대양 상과
아
이는 답죠. So 46 it says so which is describing the effect that the Buddha's teaching has on him, very positive. He's very respectful. And now in this verse, he makes a comment about that for other persons, those persons who are not knowledgeable or don't have sufficient learning, then for them, it's not easy, not an easy teaching. It's not, not everybody can understand it perfectly, right? So he says this a marvelous system. Moreover, he says. So now he's saying something further. He's saying, nevertheless, it's very profound, and for some people, it can be, troubling, right? It says, "Namakun zingba." Zingba means he uses.
진수도 좀도 직증하시도 좀도 직증
it says it can have the effect of confusing you, right? So skill mikebe kyo means persons who are not very learned. Then it's saying here be'ava za is a kind of rough grass, which maybe has thorns in it or rough, and which can, be very uncomfortable if you get tangled up in it. And so it says like that, says it can, it can become a massive confusion for people who don't have the ability to to sort it out correctly. So it's this is kind of a caution that one needs to be careful not to misunderstand.
다 취되는 다기니 다다 들어다 취디 통내 스타춘 콜로산 타와라니게 다 취디 통내 아니 취디 라고 통내 아니 남주 라고 통에 보내는 배바 두메 캬바에 저서 타네 최진이 고바 양다 셀스 다르리 아저르보체라니게 다 취디 통내 아니 남주게 통내 아니 배바 두메 고네 다 개개망고 쉬우시 때네 아니 배바 두메 캬바에 저서 타네 아니 최지 공부디 다 양도 간지 제가 이스타 간지 다 루주도 투면라서 텐제고 공 라소베 다 간지 공부 망고치 텐제 다 간지 중 망고치라 시 버려 다디.
So then Je Tsongkhapa is referencing that while if you master the Buddha's teaching, the results are beyond description. How extraordinary the effect is that the Buddha's teaching has on you. And so then the previous verse was that for some it's challenging and they may have difficulty, correctly understanding it. Then he says about himself, he said, recognizing this, then I strove greatly, right? Bebaduma means many efforts. I made great effort and sought out other learned teachers. I just make reference to the fact that he, was really very persistent about trying to reach this understanding, which this poem is a reflection of what the results are. So he says, therefore, I, referring to himself, sought repeatedly, over a long period of time, the true intent. Gongba. Gongba means that there are different levels to the Buddha's teachings, so that can be interpreted in different ways. But then there's all of it comes from some, an ultimate purpose. So, for instance, the one verse before, which he said that everything which he taught was meant to bring you to correct understanding of dependent origination. So that's kind of the ultimate intent that Je Tsongkhapa himself, we remember the story told at the very beginning in the morning of, he was concerned and I would say frustrated that he hadn't been able to gain that true insight. And so what lengths he went to try to achieve that.
다디도 공부해야 제사대 가르스 거제에서 대세랑시 대바의 수마 당라 장반 치지 퇴존 자와의 나기 군도 동스타디 대세 안에 랑 주르바레 아니 신데 랑데레 신데레 랑데다 제다마 도데바 셈자발라 랑조발 소바 텐데레 안 다가나시 신데다 가소바 주르발라 소바 대다바 수마 타라 장반나 다 치지 퇴존데 망조 도스다 가소바 퇴존을 자와데 망마 치지 퇴존 자와의 나기 인의 군도 동스타 퇴존게 자와데 마고쇼되는 거 셈데 버라다 가제 예지바 동수스 강에 충주수다 가제.
So 48 is describing the process that he underwent to try to gain that insight. It says, recognizing the need to strive mightily, he says, then I studied extensively, right? It's a There's numerous, he said. I studied many texts, which were both, it says, it is our own system and other systems. Then here, the translator interprets our own and others as being the middle way school, especially Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna's system, and then the other schools, meaning other philosophical schools. Then also that's the expression of ours and others could be ours meaning Buddhist and others meaning non-Buddhist, meaning he studied all kinds of Buddhist and non-Buddhist philosophy together. And as he did that, he says, then the great net of doubt in his mind got worse and worse. He felt tormented, to a great degree as he was undergoing that period of study.
원다 초제 라메 테베스 요다 메베 타방데 시신 제바 롱데바 루주 중루 군데세 지면 침베 경고제 송라칼라 토메주 탄진이게 멤버스 로메 조거 스네바 반데 데베 렉세 조가 트레스 라메 텐저 토메제 다게 이징에서 톱스 다 초제 라메 아가서로 초제 라메 테베스 라나메바 테베스 다 간제 요다 메베 타방데서 요바 랑시 요바다 아니 매바 니가 탑방 된게다 오면 다제 타니다 제외 오만 된거 시신 잡아 롱땡 된게 다 루드스 거로 시신 잡아 롱땡 바 루드 슝루 군데셀 다 슝루 군다 군 슝루 다 오마 자와셔라 소바 루드 슝 군데 세낭시텔라 아니 팀마메베 경고제 수라칼 팀마메베 답베데샤 팀마메베 경고제 수라칼라 토메 조스 수라칼라 토메 탄진이게 몽바세 수라카데라 아니 간제 토바메바시 교통에 다 간제 지마메바디 경고데 아니 가와이네 누구라 어디에 시시 수라칼라 토메주 안 대대도 되게 아니 탄진이게 몽바데세 소스 안 로메 조걸 시네지 반데 대외 렉셰지 오가트 반 로메 조걸 시네지 반데 대외 렉셰지 오가트에서 제가 라메테죠 다게 지금 로메 조걸 시네지 다 다와되게 로메 조걸 다 주가되려 로메 로메 조걸 던서 시즌는데 아니 대전도 반대 대외 렉셰되게 오가트에되게 싸워 체인데 아니 라메텐지 오다 라메텐지 통해제 다게 지금에서 또다 라마타 간제 가스반데 다와도 고물로 쪽다 팅팅다 때네 아니 동바틴주 돈도 통소 통배에서 다게 있는 애서도 소고다 소소 이데다 안에서 나시 톱송스다 간제 동바틴주 돈도 자산 콜송을 쓴 거였어.
So having described his difficulties as he pursued his efforts to master the Buddha's doctrine, he then here the next three verses 49, 50, and 51 in a very poetic way describes what brought him to a feeling of contentment and satisfaction that all his all his uncertainties were resolved. So here, how did that happen? He says, the system of your unsurpassed vehicle, right? It's referring to mainly the system of Nagarjuna, the system of the Buddha's teaching that was interpreted by Nagarjuna. So it says, Nagarjuna was prophesied, right? There are sutras, a number of sutras, different sutras. Samadhi Raja, one in particular, which makes reference to the appearance of Nagarjuna. So saying his name is mentioned in the sutras. Since Nagarjuna existed, maybe it says, in fact, the prophecy says 400 years after the time of the Buddha. So the prophecy was made, you know, about the future. And says that he Nagarjuna was, how did the Buddha prophesy him, was that he would correctly explain the Buddha's unsurpassed system, right, in a way that rejected the two extremes of existence and non-existence, or eternalism and nihilism, right? Shunning the extremes of existence and non-existence. So he's saying here, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that in his studies, so the main source, the main, person, the main master, the main Buddhist scholar whom he relied on to gain his correct understanding is were followers of the system established by Nagarjuna initially. So then, if that's it makes reference to him as the, what's the word, the person who established it, right? The patriarch of the middle way school, right? So 50 and 51 are now going to talk more specifically about his followers, among his followers, especially Chandakirti. And so it says, in the case of Nagarjuna, he says, he refers in 49 still, rather, sorry, that Nagarjuna's writings and the system expressed in his writings are like a how does he refer, here it says, a night lily grove. So I don't know, night lilies, do they grow in the water or they grow in the ground? Anyway, it's like a place where many night lilies, I think, are blue, right? Those are beautiful flowers, right? They're also a symbol of purity. And so saying that in the grove of night lilies that are Nagarjuna's system, system expressed in his writings, and then to extend the what do you call an extended metaphor? So this is a literary device. So he says he refers to the moon, right? He refers to the fully developed moon of pure knowledge, right? Says Dime Kimbe Kinkorge. It says it's like a an orb. Gingor means like an orb, a heavenly body in this case, right? Here it says orb. You use the word orb, right?
Say orb.
Orb, yes, O-R-B. It says then that fully developed orbs, in this case referring to a full moon, right, is the fully developed orb of stainless wisdom, right? Surang Kala, that orb travels in it travels, so let's see, Tanzin Yingi Mumbasel, kind of stuff. So that stainless knowledge, so the moon travels through the sky is part of the image, right? So that orb of stainless wisdom travels unimpededly, right? Travels unobstructedly. The sky is empty space, and the moon moves freely through the sky of the Buddha's discourses, right? And so it says glides freely across scripture's space. So it's the moon, the knowledge, this knowledge is
路住给雄路的公家车，没都公家车来着，前面前边见过的。 반대 다외 렉셰 데이터 팀이 중고시 남가 데이터 좀된 되게 숭숭럽다 자네 어디 다 다와디 샤용디 꾸모데 메도데 샤고요서 아니 로메 조가 된저 로메 조가 된저 다 간제 된저 강 메바 수고요.
Okay, so I'm getting help. So this the moon, which is this stainless wisdom, represents the knowledge that is contained in Chandrakirti. The name Chandra is moon, right? So using Chandra to refer to Chandrakirti and represented by the moon, right? So his moon, then the moon of his knowledge moves freely through the sky. So the sky is the symbol for the totality of the Buddha's discourses, right? So Chandrakirti's own knowledge is able to understand, completely comprehend, move freely through the sky of the Buddha's scriptures, and in doing so, then his Benden Dao Lekshe means so then his excellent sayings. Lekshe means Subhashita means his, here in this case it means his excellent teachings, right? In his scriptures, in his writings. Benden Dawa means glorious, Chandra means Chandrakirti. The light, right, from the moon of his teachings dispels the darkness. It says so in Tanzin Yingi Mumbasa. So Tanzin is the grasping at Tanzin Gitawa is there are 5 kinds of views. Views meaning erroneous views. One of them is called the view of extreme. So the extreme view is the 2 extremes of nihilism, eternalism. So in this case, so that's here represented by the darkness of night, right? So the darkness in a person's heart, meaning the person's mind, right? The darkness of ignorance in the person's mind is especially represented by the ignorance of the extreme views, right? If something exists, it has to be real. If it's not real, it doesn't exist. Those 2 extremes, right? So those 2 erring extremes, Chandrakirti's, moon-like teachings are able to dispel that darkness. So then also continuing with this extended then metaphor simile. So the sky, so in the night sky, the most luminous body is the moon. But there are also countless other stars, and they're tiny. So those stars rather, are here described as representing wrongful explanations. So the moonlight outshines suppresses the lesser lights of wrongful teachings, and so that the white light or Choeje garland of white lights. I'm not sure why it's referred to as a garland. Perhaps movements in the sky is like makes us like a circle, and so it's a garland because it's a multiplicity of scriptures, more than one. So it says his garland of white light, the white light of his excellent teachings, has clarified, and it makes clear. What's it say? Let's see. Illuminated by the garland of white lights of Chandra's well-ordered the moon, whose stainless orb is full, glides freely across scripture's space, which dispels the darkness of extremist hearts. I think heart means the person in their mind, right? and outshines the consolations of false speakers. And then he says, so this is describing, this parable, right? That's the word for it. A parable, so extended. So this parable is meant to express the source from which Lama Tsongkhapa was able to dispel all of his uncertainty. And so it says here, so the teachings in the writings of Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti especially, and then as explained by his lamas, mentioned Lama Rendawa and no doubt also Manjushri, when I was able to, here it says, he's writing to us a poet, that means when I saw the light of Chandrakirti's writings, then it said, that means I gained an understanding of them, then I was able to achieve a sense of, Nyalso means rest, but it means his feeling of the need to continue searching, right, which is a kind of a stressful urge. He says that was, allayed. And so he was...
다 제바 군레 숭게니 제바 총이 대안이 뒤에 개발 텔레 산제 제전셔서 다 제바 군레 숭게 제바 아 제바 총이 대안이 다 뒤에 인지수도 다 대나네 숭게 제바나네 다 땡제 저와초 나 땡제 저와초 숭바테 다 뒤에 인지리 개발이 델레스 산제 제전서 다 개발이나 다 산제 숭샤죠 땡제 저와초 아니 숭델라 제수 테메한테 델레 제제 치고고레스 추델라 산제 제수 템바 제시스 다 디스고다 가제.
So then now 52, he's talking about the Buddha. He's talking about the Buddha's teachings, and he's talking about the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination in particular. So he starts out by saying, then among all the Buddha's activities, enlightened activities, right? So various ways, 12 major deeds of a Buddha, and then in the Prajnaparamita, there's 27 levels of Buddha's activities. So among all the Buddha's enlightened deeds, right, the deed of speech, the deed of teaching, says, is the supreme of all the Buddha's activities. And among them, it says, this teaching, right, is the most important, right? Is this teaching of dependent origination. And then he says, therefore, he says, those persons who are learned, I mean, not easy to develop the correct understanding of what Tsongkhapa achieved, but those who are determined and those who are, develop some knowledge, then those persons should use this deed of the Buddha, this teaching of dependent origination, to carry out the practice which is called recollection of the Buddha. So there are 6 main recollections. One of them is each of the 3 dharmas. Buddha, recollecting the Buddha, recollecting the Dharma. Then Buddha, the recollection of the Buddha should be mainly based on then realizing and reflecting about the extraordinary deed of teaching the Dharma and especially teaching dependent origination.
그래서
Thus,
对제수 럽도 중주대 개월송라 장바 미면시 년조절로 소배 그런 장수 첨부되라 대다 그여서다 tombalana mewa ne tombatela jesu rabdu chune jesu rabdu chunga yisu da gyayosung la de yude de tombalana mewa tege gyayosung la da jangba mime da tesu nyamle tese mime bachi da kem kyunga geja jangba mime chebe ani nenjo chobe gelong nenjo choba tumbe ani gelong shi yis da kanje tende yude nenjo chola tumbe gelong shi da 제르모라니 수고라니 저절로 저 간로시안 장수 첨부되다 좀 되대 장수 첨부되라니 대다 그자 집에스
Oh, I love it. Don't let the just 개월 수는 장을 이면시 내절절 좀 결혼식 영성 좀 와이고. So 53. Dici Burwa?
아,
Di Tike Dici Burwa?
응.
So yeah. So having gone forth, right? Here it says become a renunciate. Become a renunciate. Rabdu Joma is a Tibetan for becoming a homeless ascetic, becoming a monk. Huh? So it says, following, so it's saying becoming a monk, a monk follower of that teacher, right? Dön de means that teacher. Jesu means following him. In becoming a renunciant, Buddha Sakyamuni himself became a renunciant. And then I'm one who did that first, and then he says, also my efforts to learn, Dangbam here means to study the victor's teachings, then have done so not in a limited way, right? Mimemba means not in an insignificant way, right? Done meaning he's saying I studied, extensively and with great effort. It says, and then not only that, so I became a renunciate. I studied extensively. Ninjorjola Tsumbe. Ninjorjola Tsumba means then I also strove to practice the teaching, right? I am such a monk, Gelong Shik. So it says to the great what's that? Zhangsong is sage, Rishi in Sanskrit, right? Rishi means like a very like a supernaturally wise person. Or it's the ascetic. And here it says great seer. Also, the great ascetic, I show respect in this way. But this is biographical. He's referring to himself.
就说
Also,
他的确了没那么明白的，
no,
东巴拉那没别，东巴他加瓦听他拉没听明白，给我听啊，主要没了，我心里谈别准备，就是我他东巴拉那没吧，他弄个东巴他，都怪东巴，我拉那没吧的，安尼东巴拉那没别，安尼拉那没别，安尼东巴，东巴中间这个拉那没别，弄到个东巴的加瓦听他，他拉没听明白，安尼给我听个安尼，主要没了，我心里谈别准备，安尼就是我个意思。
yes. Verse 54 is a dedication prayer. So there are many ways to perform that dedication. This verse in particular is singled out as describing a special kind of dedication, right? So normally, whatever virtue you gain, you dedicate it to achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, right? In this case, the Lama Tsongkhapa dedicates his virtue to enabling all sentient beings to meet with a spiritual teacher, as he did. So it says the opportunity doesn't say opportunity, but it says it's meaning. He says my meeting. So this is my good fortune to meet with this teaching of the unsurpassed teacher, right? Of the highest teacher, is due to my own lama's kindness, my own guru's kindness, and therefore, said then he's saying, then the virtue of Tagawasa di Dandati Sendi Karasa Joe Gawasuyore, Sombe Gawasuyore. Gawadi Yang.
아, 개와디 도와물라 다 좀be 개와 쓰고라 다 단다.
So it's probably referring to his composition of this text. So it's whatever virtue is gained from my having composed this prayer, may it serve, may I dedicate it to the cause, right, of enabling all beings without exception to be able to meet with a true spiritual teacher.
다 펜제 데 템방 시베다 아니 년도lun게 넘버 메요시 템베 간주시네 템발라 이제네베 다도 강화쇼스 다 펜제 조알라 내가도 터도 타치도 펜버제베 아니 템바디 아니 시바 타타 tama manu pardes ko sebe tarani a malu padani ngendo susula ani lo ngemba ani mato pato lo pato ba ta magu bala sobe ta lunge o tende lo ngemba ngendo lunge namba meyo da tezo no mase tembe ngangzu she ne temba la ta tembe ngangzu she ya zo tongba tinju ge ten tende ngangzu she ga do ne temba la yeshe ne ba ta do ne kangwa shos.
Verse 55 is an so-called aspirational prayer, pranidhana, as opposed to a dedication. So the prayer is that that the Buddha's teaching not be kind of adversely affected, that its pristine nature should survive and continue, and then Jambing on Sushin Tumba like Yichi, maybe talk to Gong or so. Garasa. So so it says first half is that the Buddha's teaching, so that it says the teaching of this benefactor, literally, right? Beneficent one, he says here. Penza de Demba An. Moreover, his teaching not only should he not only does Tsongkhapa dedicate the virtue of this text towards others to be able to meet with teachers, then also may this teaching of the benefactor, meaning the Buddha, for until the end of existence, right? Until the end of existence means the end of samsara, means forever. May it never be kind of shaken, right? That means may it never be, kind of damaged in any way by the winds of wrongful thoughts, right? The wrongful, misunderstandings and adverse, attitudes and so forth. May the Buddha's teaching not be, damaged in any way by other persons' negativity, you can say. And may beings come to learn the nature of the teaching, the substance of the teaching. And having done so, having learned the nature of the teaching, and by extension, they should be filled with great faith towards the teacher. That's all.
This one. 다 때문에 중에 대인이 세제바 투베 농산 자와 탐저도 류당 소장 단위 증발라 계제상 로바만 주지 다 때문에 중아 아 대인이 세제바 때문에 중아 텔라 때문에 다 때문에 좋아 중아 중제 텔라 때문에 아니 동반이 싸워는 제바 텔라 투베 루상고 루상디 내 자와 탐저도 아니 류당 가서 그래 진토야 아니 류당 소장은 당내 소소 류도 소래 냥가연에야 다디 준의 마땅하지 짐발라 계지산 소바메 버친다 계지 치게 소바메 버친다 간지 동바 된주 동배 퇴나 아니 삼노당네 대토야 어디를 숨고 있어.
So now the final three verses continue with forms of pranidhana, aspirational prayers. So it says so it's referring to the Buddha's excellent system, Buddha's teaching, which makes known, which clarifies, but it illuminates, which gives persons the ability to understand this very understanding of dependent origination, right? This supreme, this most subtle, profound meaning of dependent origination, which is contained in the Buddha's excellent system, meaning as a whole. He says that system in all my lives, all my future lives, and what Je Tsongkhapa was talking about himself, may I strive to uphold this system. So he's dedicating himself to not only learning the Buddha's teaching, but also, doing what he can to preserve it, maintain it, uphold it. And in doing so, he's also has a dedication that's even willing to forsake his own life and limb, right? Lu dan sok. Lu, his body means no matter what physical difficulty he may have to, undergo, he will do it freely. No concern for life or limb. Even if it required him to give up his life in order to preserve teaching, gladly he would do so. And not for an instant may he, relax that sense of dedication.
다 demba chokde kawa pamesi nende nyembu zene drupa di takwan shiki pawa jumi namba chewe nyanza dawa shos da demba chokde ta domba chomde dala shawar ta
Lo.
demba chokde demba chomde de demba nyame domba chomde shawar demba chokde kawa pame ta kawa mangu chene nende nyembu zene drupa di takwan kange pawa ju nyam besa ta drupa di karasan ta tenje jawa ju nyamsha di imbare ta kanche nyembu rwa nende nyambu zaya di tani tenche zhuwa zhuwa nyamba shakwa ta tenchung tila tena tongpa nyenge ya ta nyambu zaya ni zhuwa di tabwan shiki pewa zhu nyambe o ta di tena namba zhuwa nyenze tawar tab kari ya ni pewa chi buku doa tena nam zhuwa to ne nyenze kadu ina dagarang shub dawar shos nyenze kundo.
So, verse 57, second to last verse, another pranadana in which he's also expressing his willingness and his intention to try to do everything he can to spread the teaching, right? So refers to the teaching in the first half of the verse with saying, Jemba Chok. Jemba Chok is the supreme leader. Supreme leader is referring to Buddha Shakyamuni. Then Buddha Shakyamuni, the supreme leader, having made countless exertions. Kawa means difficult acts. Through many difficult acts, he produced, right? He produced Nenden Kasatra making Nenden Nimboten. Nenden Nimboten. Strenuous Nimboten. Nimboten, Nenden Nimboten. Right.
Nende nyembu zene drupa nende nyembu zene zene drupa teta tenche zhawa zhunga tela tena tongpa nye tende namsha dire ta kanche tende tamya namsha nende nyembu zene drupa ro ta tata bodo kale chunya di
Nimborzen.
ah
Nimborzen. 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 So Nenden. Karsa. So Nenden Zeva means to literally to make Nenden means forcefully showing effort. So making that his most important then activity, right? Making is is the most important activity that he strove to achieve through countless efforts, right? Is to achieve Buddhahood in order to express his unsurpassed teaching. So then it's describing how Buddha achieved enlightenment and then taught after his enlightenment the Dharma throughout his lifetime. Then it says, so that resulted in the holy teaching that we all have access to. So then Tsongkhapa himself, he says, may I spend all my days and nights, all the time, day and night, without any break. May I reflect, may I consider what can I do to help to spread and propagate whatever methods can I find to help to spread this holy teaching and keep it thriving.
다 사상 답에 취도 좀 봐나 창도 업무진된 정화다 레된 나보라서 손에 여매 받아도 저서 다 사상 남바 답에 아니 투베 주베 아니 데베 냥보디 아니 취데라 좀버 제베 아니 좀버 제바 인자 아니 전나 장바래 업무 제진이 아니 지된 저와 고시 레된 나보 자부치면 남도세 라소베다 조종 어떤저 여매만 따도 안에 톡체로 지스
장바지
레든 나고 라소 숨매장 숨어지 딱 간지 단렉 나고 레든 나고체 아니 다고 잡고 남도세 남세 장 아니 여매만 따도 톡체 지스
voilà.
지금 좀 고시도 지금도 고시
Voilà ça.
야부 전부시
Voilà ça. That's all. Then the final verse, the final pranidhana, the final aspirational prayer, it says, as I strive towards this goal, he's saying, right, in this manner, right? In this manner means never, as described in the previous two verses, that should not, for an instant, give up the desire to uphold the Buddha's teaching, and may I constantly reflect, what can I do to help the teaching to thrive? So it says, Laksam Dakpa. Laksam Dakpa means then that's a pure motivation. With that pure motivation, meaning his intention to bring about that result, he says, as I strive towards doing that, right? He says, then he's saying, may I be assisted, may I be helped. Unwaveringly means, not, at all times, you can say, right? Unswervingly means maintaining their desire to assist me. May all the protectors, meaning worldly protectors, and also then the transcendent Dharma protectors as well. So mentions in particular the worldly god Brahma and Indra, and then the world guardians of mainly the four of south, east, west, and north. Those are there are worldly and transcendent versions of them. And Legden Napo is said literally, it means the dark virtuous one, which I believe is a reference, as the translation says, is a reference to Mahakala, which is one of the principal transcendent Dharma protectors. May they all, help me to accomplish this aim that I have.
다디 차수 말해
That's a nika joke.
선쇼가 조샤쇼
Ale, 생일, ale, 매월.
Tomorrow morning.
Ale, 생일 영화를, 소개 영화를.
쇼가 정말
Ale, That's all.
선이 나타 그렇게 가서 좀 샤쳐보러 와. 아니 다
Anyway, that's all.
아니 다다리 가서 그래. 선쇼게 샤고 상도 다 샤그리 있어야 시작하면도 샤야게 시작하면도 아니 선이 쇼고 좀 샤쳐보러 와. 뒤쳐도 아니 다 디레이션 샤야 있어. 아니 다 저와든지 가유지 말이 다 주고 샤서 다
That's all. I was expecting that there was a class tomorrow morning.
Yeah, there is. There was.
Schedule on Sunday to get.
Yeah, we have people coming.
아,
Guess what?
It's in lineage.
It's with me already.
No, that's in the.
Schedule on Sunday to get. You have the.
아니.
Make it better.
네. 아, 선이 쇼고 좀 샤쳐보네.
So anyway, we were just saying that tomorrow morning, he has to do some rituals to prepare for the ceremony in the afternoon. So and he's not available.
So.
And he said, moreover, he says there probably aren't any questions for the afternoon.
Oh, there's tons of.
말을
So.
요한테 싹도요 알았어요.
Yamataka. It's a preparation.
Yeah.
Not conscious. Anyway, we finished.
가서 진행 사배 개와디 때난 거 상배 다 개와디 좀 상도 그게 이거를 세제 쇼 사시 그게 조심 배도다 레라디 시리네 아테 사이버리 시로 비데 보이 그걸 나다 시바 저거 받으시오 지수남의 구세라비 신남과 진리 쇼주 제와 보상 뱀배 주의 사수제 주의 딱도 대교지 이다마 고로다 란나무다 아메야 자주 생조를 림포체 마게와나 제주 지케와 냐과 오네 공도가 시수 대자를 꼴 신간의 대다대와 마대주의 제레스노와 일비가 샤베 세제바로 땡교 스키 야와디 요 언나 예시저서 언나 예시에 아마 우리도 걸쇼
I'm gonna clarify. Clarify before we leave.
I'm just here to yours.
Yeah, just because I had to send an email. So tomorrow we start at what time for Yamataka? 2 is what we have advertised.
Today.
ನೀವು ತಾವೇನು ನೀವು
Yeah, that was the original sketch. I think following what maybe the original plan, not what was formally announced. I think originally the idea was to have today 2, tomorrow 2 in the afternoon, and I think which is kind of
Which is totally fine.
Yeah.
So, but we won't do anything in the morning. I'll send out an email.
go ahead. Don't let it. So there's no formal teaching class tomorrow morning. No.
So people can come for lunch, Yeshua, and then start at 2.
Okay.
Or just come at 2.
Yeah, okay.
Alright.
They can come for lunch. But we need to know that name. How many people coming? Like we need at least
Yeah, I have.
otherwise like everyone's coming or not. That's
Well,
depending.
there's not the same people coming for the Yamataka that are here, so there's different people. So
Okay.
I'll send an email when I get.
Yeah,
home.
if
I'm
everyone's
not sure
coming,
I
we
can
can
hear
lunch,
back.
yeah, no problem. Yeah.
No worries. No access to the.
You know, the Lama will be using this room.
So another part, in the morning, he's gonna do his prep and gear.
Correct.
So
So
this will be closed
it's
tomorrow morning.
not available for students to come and meditate. The Lama will be here.
Okay. No worries.
Oh yeah.
Legitimate question.
So if anyone knows people who were here this morning, if you can, that aren't here, if you can let them know, I'll send a note when I get home, but I can't guarantee that everyone will see it. Yeah, I know. I know Laura, so anyway, thank you for your understanding.
You want me to come like and tell people in case they show up? I can come like.
I was gonna put a sign.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, don't have a vote. Yeah, whatever you want. Yeah, everyone gets to do longer tracks.
I wasn't expecting this, okay.
You like
That's
it?
the thing, it's time. Phil, maybe we should put this back over here?
I prefer not to. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Welcome to use it tomorrow.
But I'm reviewing these masters. Check the